Hello, everyone, and welcome to our continuing adventures reading through Dracula as part of 100 Classic Books collection. I turned it down from stereo, um, stereo to mono settings, and then I just decided to turn it back because, from what I've experienced from the Nintendo 64 onward, uh, stereo sounds better than mono usually. Um, so anyway, thank you very much for your help, asteroids. Uh, Hopefully, it'll continue to sound good. For right now, I'm going to let people know that I'm streaming, and I'll be right back. All right, asteroids. Good luck with work. Alright, everyone, welcome back. We're continuing their reading with with page take a bookmark. Yes, there we go. Page 1123. I don't know what happened with the Suva. Testing. I also don't know what happened with the capture of... Okay, give me a moment. Alright, we're going to go ahead and try to get my Suva to work again. You stay working, Suva. Gonna test flipping pages. Gonna redo the audio. Audio seems to be fine. Okay. Glad I read ahead from where I was going to go ahead and read from. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do this. All right. So we're continuing from page 1123. Dr. Seward's Diary. 17th of September. I was engaged after dinner in my study, posting up my Testing. Testing. Okay. Posting up my books, which through many of other work, and the many visits to Lucy had fallen sadly into our rear. Suddenly the door was burst open, and in rushed my patience with his face distorted with passion. I was thunderstruck, for such a thing as a patient getting of his own accord into the superintendent's study is almost unknown. Without an instant's pause, he made straight at me. He had a dinner knife in his hand, and as I saw he was dangerous, I tried to keep the table between us. He was too quick and too strong for me, however, for before I could get my balance, he had struck at me and cut my left wrist rather severely. Before he could strike again, however, I got in my right, and he was sprawling on his back. On the floor, my wrist bled freely, and quite a little pool trickled onto the carpet. I saw that my friend was not intent on further effort, and occupied myself binding up my wrist, keeping a wary eye on the prostrate figure all the time. When the attendants rushed in and we turned our attention to him, his employment positively sickened me. He was lying on his belly on the floor, licking up like a dog the blood which had fallen from my wounded wrist. He was easily secured, and to my surprise went with the attendants quite placidly, simply repeating over and over again, "The blood is the life. The blood is the life." I cannot afford to lose blood just at present. I have lost too much of late for my physical good. And then the prolonged strain of Lucy's illness and its horrible phases is telling on me. I am overexcited and weary, and I need rest, rest, rest. Happily, Van Helsing has not summoned me, so I need not forego my sleep. Tonight I could not well do without it. Telegram. Van Helsing. Antwerp to Seward. Carfax. Sent to Carfax, Sussex. As no country given. Delivered late by 22 hours. 17th of September. Do not fail to be at Hillingham tonight. If not watching all the time, frequently visit and see that flowers are as placed. Very important. Do not fail. Shall be with you as soon as possible after arrival. Dr. Seward's diary. 18th of September. Just off for train to London. The arrival of Van Helsing's telegram filled me with dismay. A whole night lost, and I know by bitter experience what may happen in a night. Of course, it is possible that all may be well, but what may have happened? Surely there is some horrible doom hanging over us, that every possible accident should thwart us in all we try to do. I shall take this cylinder with me, and then I can complete my entry on Lucy's phonograph. Memorandum left by Lucy Westerna. 17th of September, night. I write this and leave it to be seen, so that no one may by any chance get into trouble through me. This is an exact record of what took place tonight. I feel I am dying of weakness, and have barely strength to write, but it must be done if I die in the doing. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Helsing directed, and soon fell asleep. I was waked by the flapping at the window, which had begun
after that sleepwalking on the cliff at Whitby, when Mina saved me, and which now I know so well. I was not afraid, but I did wish that Dr.
We're gonna take a quick break here. I'm gonna make sure that this is being captured so I don't have to read anything over again. Testing. Testing. Okay, good. All right. I think asked Fritz for their help, but I've reset it a little bit, and for whatever reason the Suva wasn't working, so I needed to make sure. All right.
Do be seen, so that no one may be by any chance get into trouble through me. This is an exact record of what took place tonight. I feel I am dying of weakness, and have barely strength to write, but it must be done if I die in the doing. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Helsing directed, and soon fell asleep. I was waked by the flapping at the window, which had begun after that sleepwalking on the cliff at Whitby, when Mina saved me, and which now I know so well I was not afraid, but I did wish that Dr. Seward was in the next room, as Dr. Van Helsing said he would be, so that I might have called him. I tried to go to sleep, but could not. Then there came to me the old fear of sleep, and I determined to keep awake. Perversely, sleep would try to come then when I did not want it. So, as I feared to be alone, I opened my door and called out, "Is there anybody there?" There was no answer. I was afraid to wake Mother, and so closed the door again. Then, outside in the shrubbery, I heard a sort of howl, like a dog's, but more fierce and deeper. I went to the window and looked out, but could not see anything, but could see nothing except a big bat, which had evidently been buffeting its wings against the window. So I went back to bed again, but determined not to go to sleep. Presently the door opened, and Mother looked in. Seeing by my moving that I was not asleep, came in and sat by me. She said to me, even more sweetly and softly than her wont, "I was uneasy about you, darling, and came in to see that you were all right. I feared she might catch cold sitting there, and asked her to come in and sleep with me. So she came into bed and lay down beside me. She did not take off her dressing gown, for she said she would only stay a while, and then go back to her own bed. As she lay there in my arms and I in hers, the flapping and buffeting came to the window again. She was startled and a little frightened, and cried out, "What is that?" I tried to pacify her, and at last succeeded, and she lay quiet, but I could hear her poor dear heart still beating terribly. After a while there was a low howl again, and out in the shrubbery, and shortly after that there was a crash at the window, and a lot of broken glass was hurled on the floor. The window blind blew back with the wind that rushed in, and in the aperture of the broken panes there was the head of a great gaunt grey wolf. Mother cried out in fright and struggled up into a sitting posture and clutched wildly at anything that would help her. Amongst other things, she clutched the wreath of flowers that Dr. Van Helsing insisted on my wearing around my neck, and tore it away from me. For a second or two, she sat up, pointing at the wolf, and there was a strange and horrible gurgling in her throat. Then she fell over, as if struck with lightning, and her head hit my forehead and made me dizzy for a moment or two. The room and all around seemed to spin round. I kept my eyes fixed on the window, but the wolf drew his head back, and a whole myriad of little specks seemed to come blowing in through the broken window and wheeling and circling around, like the pillar of dust that travelers describe when there is a simoom in the desert. I tried to stir, but there was some spell upon me, and dear mother's poor body, which seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat, weighed me down, and I remembered no more for a while. The time did not seem long, but very, very awful, till I recovered consciousness again. Somewhere near, a passing bell was tolling. The dogs all round the neighborhood were howling, and in our shrubbery, seemingly just outside, a nightingale was singing. I was dazed and stupid with pain and terror and weakness, but the sound of the nightingale seemed like the voice of my dead mother, came back to comfort me. The sounds seemed to have awakened the maids too, for I could hear their bare feet pattering outside my door. I called to them, and they came in, and when they saw what had happened, and what it was that lay over me on the bed, they screamed out. The wind rushed in through the broken window, and the door slammed to. They lifted off the body of my dear mother and laid her covered up with a sheet on the bed that I had got up. They were all so frightened and nervous that I directed them to go to the dining room and have each a glass of wine. The door flew open for an instant and closed again. The maid shrieked and then went in a body to the dining room, and I laid what flowers I had on my dear mother's breast. When they were there, I remembered what Dr. Van Helsing had told me, that I didn't like to be, but I didn't like to remove them, and besides, I would have some of the servants to sit up with me now. I was surprised that the maids did not come back. I called them, but got no answer, so I went to the dining room to look for them. My heart sank when I saw what had happened. They all four lay helpless on the floor, breathing heavily. The decanter of sherry was on the table half full, but there was a queer, acrid smell about. I was suspicious and examined the decanter. It smelt of laudanum, and looked on the sideboard. I found that the bottle which mother's doctor uses for her, was empty. What am I to do? What am I to do? I am back in the room with mother. I cannot leave her. I am alone, save for the sleeping servants whom someone has drugged, alone with the dead. I dare not go out, for I can hear the low howl of the wolf through the broken window. The air seems full of specks, floating and circling in the draught from the window, and the lights burn blue and dim. What am I to do? God shield me from harm this night. I shall hide this paper in my breast, where they shall find it when they come to lay me out. My dear mother gone. It is time that I go too. Goodbye, dear Arthur. If I should not survive the night, God keep you, dear, and God help me.
Chapter 12, Dr. Seward's Diary. 18th of September. I drove at once to Hillingham and arrived early. Keeping my cab at the gate, I went up the avenue alone. I knocked gently and rang as quietly as possible, for I feared to disturb Lucy or her mother, and hoped to only bring a servant to the door. After a while, finding no response, I knocked and rang again. Still no answer. I cursed the laziness of the servants, that they should lie abed at such an hour, for it was now 10 o'clock, and so rang and knocked again, but more impatiently, but still without response. Hitherto I had blamed only the servants, but now a terrible fear began to assail me. Was this desolation but another link in the chain of doom which seemed drawing tight around us? Was it indeed a house of death to which I had come too late? I knew that minutes, even seconds, of delay might mean hours of danger to Lucy. If she had had again one of those frightful relapses, and I went round the house to try if I could find by chance an entry somewhere. I could find no means of ingress. Every window and door was fastened and locked, and I returned baffled to the porch. As I did so, I heard the rapid pit-pat of a swiftly driven horse's feet. They stopped at the gate, and a few seconds later I met Van Helsing running up the avenue. When he saw me, he gasped out, "Then it was you, and just arrived. How is she? Are we too late? Did you not get my telegram?" I answered as quickly and coherently as I could that I had only got his telegram early in the morning, and had not lost a minute in coming here, and that I could not make any one in the house hear me. He paused and raised his hat as he said solemnly, "Then I fear we are too late. God's will be done." With his usual recuperative energy, he went on, "Come, if there be no other way to get in, we must make one. Time is all in all to us now." We went round to the back of the house, where there was a kitchen window. The professor took a small surgical saw from his case, and handing it to me, pointed to the iron bars which guarded the window. I attacked them at once, and had very soon cut through 3 of them. Then, with a long, thin knife, we pushed back the fastening of the sashes, and opened the window. I helped the professor in, and followed him. There was no one in the kitchen or in the servants' rooms, which were close at hand. We tried all the rooms as we went along, and in the dining room, dimly lit by rays of light through the shutters, found 4 servant women lying on the floor. There was no need to think them dead, for their strenuous breathing and the acrid smell of laudanum in the room left no doubt as their condition. Van Helsing and I looked at each other, and as we moved away, he said, "We can attend to them later." Then we ascended to Lucy's room. For an instant or two we paused at the door to listen, but there was no sound that we could hear. With white faces and trembling hands, we opened the door gently and entered the room. How shall I describe what we saw? On the bed lay 2 women, Lucy and her mother. The latter lay farthest in, and she was covered with a white sheet, the edge of which had been blown back by the draught through the broken window, showing the drawn white face with a look of terror fixed upon it. By her side lay Lucy, with face white and still more drawn. The flowers which had been round her neck we found upon her mother's bosom, and her throat was bare, showing the two little wounds which we had noticed before, but looking horribly white and mingled. Without a word, the professor bent over the bed, his head almost touching poor Lucy's breast. Then he gave a quick turn of his head, as of one who listens, and leaping to his feet, he cried out to me, "It is not too late. Quick, quick, bring the brandy." I flew downstairs and returned with it, taking care to smell and taste it, lest it too were drugged. Like the decanter of sherry which I found on the table, the maids were still breathing, but more restlessly, and I fancied the narcotic was wearing off. I did not stay to make sure, but returned to Van Helsing. He rubbed the brandy, as on another occasion, on her lips and gums, and on her wrist and the palms of her hands. He said to me, "I can do this, all that can be at the present. You go wake those maids, flick them in the face with a wet towel, and flick them hard. Make them get heat and fire and a warm bath. This poor soul is nearly as cold as that beside her. She will need to be heated before we can do anything more." I went at once, and found little difficulty in waking 3 of the women. The 4th was only a young girl, and the drug had evidently affected her more strongly. So I lifted her on the sofa and let her sleep. The others were dazed at first, but as remembrance came back to them, they cried and sobbed in a hysterical manner. I was stern with them, however, and would not let them talk. I told them that one life was bad enough to lose, and that if they delayed, they would sacrifice Miss Lucy. So, sobbing and crying, they went about their way, half-clad as they were, and prepared fire and water. Fortunately, the kitchen and boiler fires were still alive, and there was no lack of hot water. We got a bath and carried Lucy out as she was, and placed her in it. Whilst we were busy chafing her limbs, there was a knock at the hall door. One of the maids ran off, hurried on some more clothes, and opened it. Then she returned and whispered to us that there was a gentleman who had come with a message from Mr. Homewood. I bade her simply tell him what he must wait. Tell him that he must wait, for we could see no one now. She went away with the message and engrossed with our work. I clean forgot all about him. I never saw in all my experience the professor work in such deadly earnest. I knew as he knew that it was a stand-up fight with death, and I told him so. He answered me in a way that I did not understand, but with the sternest look that his face could wear. If that were all, I would stop here, where we are now, and let her fade away into peace, for I see no light in life over her horizon. He went on with his work with, if possible, renewed and more frenzied vigor. Presently we both began to be conscious that the heat was beginning to be of some effect. Lucy's heart beat a trifle more audibly to the stethoscope, and her lungs had a perceptible movement. Van Helsing's face almost beamed as we lifted her from the bath and rolled her in a hot sheet. To dry her, he said to me, "The first gain is ours. Check to the king." We told Lucy that we took Lucy into another room, which had by now been prepared, and laid her in bed and forced a few drops of brandy down her throat. I noticed that Van Helsing tied a soft silk handkerchief round her throat. She was still unconscious and was quite as bad as, if not worse than, we had ever seen her. Van Helsing called in one of the women and told her to stay with her and not to take her eyes off her till we returned, and then beckoned me out of the room. We must consult as to what it is to be done, he said. As we descended the stairs in the hall, he opened the dining room door, and we passed in. He closing the door carefully behind him. The shutters had been opened, but the blinds were already down, without obedience to the etiquette of death, which the British woman of the lower class always rigidly observes. The room was therefore dimly dark. It was, however, light enough for our purposes. Van Helsing's sternness was somewhat relieved by a look of perplexity. He was evidently torturing his mind about something, so I waited for an instant, and he spoke. What are we to do now? Where are we to turn for help? Must have another transfusion of blood, and that soon, or that poor girl's life won't be worth an hour's purchase. You're exhausted already. I am exhausted too. I fear to trust those women, even if they would have courage to submit. What are we to do for someone who will open his veins for her? What's the matter with me, anyhow? The voice came from the sofa across the room, and its tones brought relief and joy to my heart, for there were those of Quincy Morris. Van Helsing started angrily at the first sound, but his face softened, and a glad look came into his eyes as I cried out, Quincy Morris, and rushed toward him with outstretched hands. What brought you here? I cried as our hands met. I guess art is the cause. He handed me a telegram. I've not heard from Seward in 3 days, and I'm terribly anxious. Cannot leave. Father's still in the same condition. Send me word on how Lucy is. Do not delay. Homeward. I think I came just in the nick of time. You know, you have only to tell me what to do. Van Helsing strode forward and took his hand, looking him straight in the eyes, as he said, A brave man's blood is the best thing on this earth when a woman is in trouble. You're a man and no mistake. Well, the devil may work against us for all he's worth, but God sends us men when we want them. Once again, we went through that ghastly operation. I have not the heart to go through with the details. Lucy had got a terrible shock, and it told on her more than before. For though plenty of blood went into her veins, her body did not respond to the treatment as well as on other occasions. Her struggle back into life was something frightful to see and hear. However, the action of both heart and lungs improved, and Van Helsing made a subcutaneous injection of morphia. As before, and with good effect, her faint became a profound slumber. The professor watched whilst I went downstairs with Quincy Morris, and sent one of the maids to pay off one of the cabmen who were waiting. I left Quincy lying down after having a glass of wine, and told the cook to get ready a good breakfast. Then a thought struck me, and I went back to the room where Lucy now was. When I came softly in, I found Van Helsing with a sheet or two of notepaper in his hand. He had evidently read it, and was thinking it over as he sat with his hand to his brow. There was a look of grim satisfaction in his face, as of one who has had a doubt solved. He handed me the paper, saying only, "If Lucy dropped from Lucy's breast when we carried her to the bath." When I had read it, I stood looking at the professor, and after a pause asked him, "In God's name, what does it all mean? Was she, or is she, mad? Or what sort of horrible danger is it?" I was so bewildered that I did not know what to say more. Van Helsing put out his hand and took the paper, saying, "Do not trouble about it now. Forget it for the present. You shall know and understand it all in good time. But it will be later. And now, what is it that you came to me to say?" This brought me back to fact, and I was all myself again. I came to speak about the certificate of death. If we do not act properly and wisely, there may be an inquest, and that paper would have to be produced. I am in hopes that we need have no inquest. For if we had, it would surely kill poor Lucy, if nothing else did. And the other doctor who attended her knows that Miss Westerner had disease of the heart, and we can certify that she died of it. Let us fill up the certificate at once, and I shall take it myself to the registrar, and go on to the undertaker. Good. Oh, my friend John, well thought of. Truly, Miss Lucy is, if she be sad in the foes that beset her, is at least happy in the friends that love her. 1, 2, 3, all open their veins for her, besides one, old man. Ah, yes, I know, friend. John, I am not blind. I love you all the more for it. Now go. In the hall, I met Quincy Morris with a telegram for Arthur, telling him that Miss Westerner was dead, that Lucy also had been ill, but was now going on better, and that Van Helsing and I were with her. I told him where I was going, and he hurried me out, but as I was going, said, "When you come back, Jack, may I have 2 words with you all to ourselves?" I nodded in reply and went out. I found no difficulty about the registration, and arranged with the local undertaker to come in the evening to measure for the coffin and to make arrangements. When I got back, Quincy was waiting for me. I told him I would see him as soon as I knew about Lucy, and went up to her room. She was still sleeping, and the professor seemingly had not moved from his seat at her side, for his putting his fingers to his lips, I gathered that he expected her to wake before long, and was afraid of forestalling nature. So I went down to Quincy and took him into the breakfast room, where the blinds were not drawn down, and which was a little more cheerful, or rather less cheerless, than the other rooms. When we were alone, he said to me, just double checking on who we're reading as, Jack Seward, I don't want to shove myself in anywhere where I've no right to be, but this is no ordinary case. You know I love that girl, and is it, am I reading as Van Helsing, or am I reading as, when I got back, Quincy was writing to me. We're reading as Quincy. Because it's been saying he in different places, and I went down to Quincy and took him in the, okay, Quincy, yep. Jack Seward, I don't want to shove myself in anywhere where I've no right to be, but this is no ordinary case. You know I love that girl and wanted to marry her, but although that's all past and gone, I cannot help feeling anxious about her all the same. What is it that's wrong with her? The Dutchman, and a fine old fellow he is. I can see that said that time you two came into the room, that you must have another transfusion of blood, and that both you and he were exhausted. Now I know well that you medical men speak in camera, and that a man must not expect to know what they consult about in private. But this is no common matter, and whatever it is, I have done my parts. It is not that so. That's so, I said, and he went on. I take it that both you and Van Helsing had done already what I did today. Is not that so? That's so. And I guess Art was in it too. When I saw him 4 days ago, down at his own place, he looked queer. I have not seen anything pulled down so quick since I was on the pampas, and had a mare that I was fond of go to grass all in a night. One of those big bats that they call vampires had got at her in the night, and what with his gorge and the vein left open, there wasn't enough blood in her to let her stand up, and I had to put a bullet through her as she lay. Jack, if you may tell me without betraying confidence, Arthur was the first. Is not that so? As he spoke to the poor fellow, looked terribly anxious. He was in a torture of suspense regarding the woman he loved, and his utter ignorance of the terrible mystery which seemed to surround her intensified his pain. His very heart was bleeding, and it took all the manhood of him, and there was a royal lot of it, too, to keep him from breaking down. I paused before answering, for I felt that I must not betray anything which the professor wished kept secret. But already he knew so much, and guessed so much, that there could be no reason for not answering. So I answered in the same phrase. That's so. And how long has this been going on? About 10 days. 10 days? Then I guess Jack Seward, that
pretty creature that we all love has had put into her veins within that time the blood of 4 strong men. Man alive, her whole body wouldn't hold it. Then, coming close to me, he spoke in a fierce half-whisper. What took it out? I shook my head. That, I said, is the crux. Van Helsing is simply frantic about it, and I am at my wit's end. I can't even hazard a guess. There has been a series of little circumstances which have thrown out all our calculations as to Lucy being properly watched, but these shall not occur again. Here we stay until all be well or ill. Quincy held out his hand. Count me in, he said. You and the Dutchman will tell me what to do, and I'll do it. When she woke late in the afternoon, Lucy's first movement was to feel in her breast, and to my surprise, produce the paper which Van Helsing had given me to read. The careful professor had replaced it where it had come from, lest on waking she should be alarmed. Her eye then lit on Van Helsing and on me too, and gladdened. Then she looked around. The room was seeing where she was. Shuddered, she gave a loud cry and put her poor thin hands before her pale face. We both understood what that meant, that she had realized to the full her mother's death, so we tried what we could to comfort her. Doubtless sympathy eased her somewhat, but she was very low in thought and spirit, and wept silently and weakly for a long time. We told her that either or both of us would now remain with her all the time, and that seemed to comfort her. Towards dusk she fell into a doze. Here a very odd thing occurred. Whilst still asleep, she took the paper from her breast and tore it in two. Van Helsing stepped over and took the pieces from her. All the same, however, she went on with the action of tearing, as though the material were still in her hands. Finally, she lifted her hands and opened them as though scattering the fragments. Van Helsing seemed surprised, and his brows gathered as if in thought. But he has said nothing. 19th of September. All last night she slept fitfully, being always afraid to sleep, and something weaker when she woke from it. The professor and I took it in turns to watch, and we never left her for a moment unattended. Quincy Morris said nothing about his intention, but I knew that all night long he patrolled round and round the house. When the day came, its searching light showed the ravages in poor Lucy's strength. She was hardly able to turn her head, and the little nourishment which she could take seemed to do her no good. At times she slept, and both Van Helsing and I noticed a difference in her. Between sleeping and waking, whilst asleep she looked stronger, although more haggard, and her breathing was softer. Her open mouth showed the pale gums drawn back from the teeth, which thus looked positively longer and sharper than usual. When she woke, the softness of her eyes evidently changed, the expression of how she looked her own self, although a dying one. In the afternoon,
she asked for Arthur, and we telegraphed for him. Quincy went off to meet him at the station. When he arrived, it was nearly 6 o'clock, and the sun was setting full and warm, and the red light streamed in through the window and gave more color to the pale cheeks. When he saw her, Arthur was simply choking with emotion, and none of us could speak. In the hours that had passed, the fits of sleep or the comatose condition that passed for it had grown more frequent, so that the pauses when conversation was possible were shortened. Arthur's presence, however, seemed to act as a stimulant. She rallied a little and spoke to him more brightly than she had done since we arrived. He too pulled himself together and spoke as cheerily as he could, so that the best was made of everything. It was now nearly 1 o'clock, and he and Van Helsing are sitting with her. I am to relieve them in a quarter of an hour, and I am entering this on Lucy's phonograph. Until 6 o'clock, they are to try to rest. I fear that tomorrow will end our watching, for the shock has been too great, and the poor child cannot rally. God help us all.
Letter Mina Harker to Lucy Westerna, unopened by her. 17th of September. My dearest Lucy, it seems an age since I heard from you, or indeed since I wrote. You will pardon me, I know, for all my faults when you have read all my budget of news. Well, I got my husband back, all right. When we arrived at Exeter, there was a carriage waiting for us, and in it, though he had an attack of gout, Mr. Hawkins, he took us to his house, where there were rooms for us, all nice and comfortable, and we dined together. After dinner, Mr. Hawkins said,
My dears, I want to drink your health and prosperity, and may every blessing attend you both. I know you both from children, and have with love and pride seen you grow up. Now I want you to make difficult to keep track of who's who. Oh, it's the lawyer guy. Okay. My dears, I want to drink your health and prosperity, and may every blessing attend you both. I know you both from children, and have with love and pride seen you grow up. Now I want you to make your home here with me. I have left neither chick nor child. All are gone, and in my will I have left you everything. I cried, Lucy dear, as Jonathan and the old man collapsed.
I cried, Lucy dear, as Jonathan and the old man clasped hands. Our evening was a very, very happy one. So here we are, installed in this beautiful old house, and from both my bedroom and the drawing room, I can see the great elms of the cathedral close, with their great black stems standing out against the old yellow stone of the cathedral, and I can hear the rooks overhead, calling and calling, and chattering and gossiping all day. After the manner of rooks and humans, I am busy. I need not tell you, arranging things and housekeeping. Jonathan and Mr. Hawkins are busy all day, for now that Jonathan is a partner, Mr. Hawkins wants to tell him all about the clients. How's your dear mother getting on? I wish I could run up to to town a day or two to see you, dear, but dare not go yet. With so much on my shoulders, Jonathan wants to look, Jonathan wants looking after still. He is beginning to put some flesh on his bones again, but he was terribly weakened by the long illness. Even now, he sometimes starts out of his sleep in a sudden way and awakes all trembling until I can coax him back to his usual placidity. However, thank God these occasions grow less frequent as the days go on, and they will in time pass away altogether, I trust. And now I have told you my news. Let me ask yours. When are you to be married, and where and who is to perform the ceremony? And what are you to wear? And is it to be a public or private wedding? Tell me all about it, dear. Tell me all about everything, for there is nothing which interests you which will not be dear to me. Jonathan asked me to send his respectful duty, but I do not think this is.
Take a commercial break, I guess. Be right back. Welcome back.
I do not think that it is good enough from the junior partner of the important firm, Hawkins and Harker. And so, as you love me and he loves me, and I love you with all the moods and tenses of the verb, I send you simply his love. Instead, goodbye, my dearest Lucy, and all blessings on you. Yours, Mina Harker.
Report from Patrick Hennersey, MD. MRCSLKQCPLMOUSE, etc., to John Seward, MD. Let's see who this is before I start reading it. so that I don't get confused on who it is. Ah, Dr. Seward's second in command. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go with Patrick. Says Patrick. Might as well go with Patrick. 20th of September. My dear sir, in accordance with your wishes, I enclose report of the condition of everything left in my change. With regard to patient Renfield, there is more to say. He has had another outbreak, which might have had a dreadful ending, but which, as it fortunately happened, was unattended by with any unhappy results. This afternoon, a carrier's cart with two men made a call at the empty house, whose grounds but on ours. The house to which you will remember the patient twice ran away. The men stopped at our gate to ask the porter their way, as they were strangers. I was myself looking out at the study window, having a smoke after dinner, and saw one of them come up to the house. As he passed the window of Renfield's room, the patient began to rate him from within, and called him all the foul names he could lay his tongue to. The man, who seemed a decent fellow enough, contented himself by telling him to shut up for a foul-mouthed beggar. Whereon our man accused him of robbing him and wanting to murder him, and said that he would hinder him if he were to swing for it. I opened the window and signed to the man not to notice, so he contented himself after looking the place over and making up his mind as to what kind of a place he has got by saying, "Lord bless you, sir, I wouldn't mind what was said to me in a bloomin' madhouse. I pity ye and the governor for having to live in the house with a wild beast like that." And then he asked his way civilly enough, and I told him where the gate of the empty house was. He went away, followed by the threats and curses the revilings from our man. I went down to see if I could make out any cause for his anger, since he is usually such a well-behaved man, and except his violent fits, nothing of the kind had ever occurred. I found him, to my astonishment, quite composed and most genial in his manner. I tried to get him to talk of the incident, but he blandly asked me questions as to what I meant, and led me to believe that he was completely oblivious of the affair. It was, I am sorry to say, however, only another instance of his cunning, for within half an hour I heard of him again. This time he had broken out through the window of his room, and was running down the avenue. I called to the attendant to follow me, and he ran after him, for I feared he was intent on some mischief. My fear was justified when I saw the same cart which had passed before coming down the road, having on it some great wooden boxes. The men were wiping their foreheads, and were flushed in the face, as if with violent exercise. Before I could get up to him, the patient rushed at them, and pulled one of them off the cart, began to knock his head against the ground. If I had not seized him just at the moment, I believe he would have killed the man there and then. The other fellow jumped down and struck him over the head with the butt end of his heavy whip. It was a terrible blow, but he did not seem to mind it, but seized him also, and struggled with the three of us, pulling us to and fro as if we were kittens. You know I am no light weight, and the others were both burly men. At first he was silent in his fighting, but as we began to master him, and the attendants were putting a straight waistcoats on him, he began to shout, "I'll frustrate them, and they shan't rob me." They shan't murder me by inches. I'll fight for my lord and master. And all sorts of similar incoherent ravings. It was with very considerable difficulty that they got him back to the house and put him in the padded room. One of the attendants, Hardy, had a finger broken. However, I sat it all right, and he is going on well. The two carriers were at first loud in their threats of action for damages and promised to rain all the penalties of the law on us. Their threats were, however, mingled with some sort of indirect apology for the defeat of the two of them by a feeble madman. They said that if it had not been for the way that their strength had been spent in carrying and raising the heavy boxes to the cart, they would have made short work of him. They gave another reason for their defeat: the extraordinary state of drought to which they had been reduced to the dusty nature of their occupation, and the reprehensible distance from the scene of the labours of any place of public entertainment. I quite understood their drift, and after a stiff glass of grog, or rather more of the same, and with each a sovereign in hand, they made light of the attack, and swore that they would encounter a worse madman any day for the pleasure of meeting so and so bloomin' good a bloke as your correspondent. I took their names and addresses in case they might be needed. They are as follows: Jack Smollett of Dudding's Rents, King George's Road, Great Walworth, and Thomas Snelling. Peter Farley Rowe, Guide Court, Bethnal Green. They are both in the employment of Harris and Sons, Moving and Shipment Company, Orange Masters Yard, Soho. I shall report to you any matter of interest occurring here, and shall wire you at once if there is anything of importance. Believe me, dear sir, yours faithfully, Patrick Hennessy. Letter
Letter Mina Harker to Lucy Westerna, unopened by her, 18th of September. My dearest Lucy, such a sad blow has befallen us. Mr. Hawkins has died very suddenly. Some may not think it so sad for us, but we had both come to so love him that it really seems as though we had lost a father. I never knew either father or mother, so that the dear old man's death is a real blow to me. Jonathan is greatly distressed. It is not only that he feels sorrow, deep sorrow, for the dear good man who has befriended him all his life, and now at the end has treated him like his own son, and left him a fortune, which to people of our modest bringing up is wealth, beyond the dream of avarice. But Jonathan feels it on another account. He says the amount of responsibility which it puts upon him makes him nervous. He begins to doubt himself. I try to cheer him up, and my belief in him helps him to have a belief in himself. But it is here that the grave shook that he experience tells upon him the most. Oh, it is too hard that a sweet, simple, noble, strong nature such as his, a nature which enabled him by our dear good friend's aid to rise from clerk to master in a few years, should be so injured that the very essence of its strength is gone. Forgive me, dear, if I worry you with my troubles in the midst of your own happiness. But, Lucy, dear, I must tell someone, for the strain of keeping up a brave and cheerful appearance to Jonathan tries me, and I have no one here that I can confide in. I dread coming up to London, as we must do the day after tomorrow, for poor Mr. Hawkins left in his will that he was to be buried in the grave with his father, as there are no relations at all. Jonathan will have to be chief mourner. I shall try to run over to see you, dearest, if only for a few minutes. Forgive me for troubling you with all blessings. Your loving Mina Harker.
Dr. Seward's Diary. 20th of September. Only resolution and habit can let me make an entry tonight. I am too miserable, too low-spirited, too sick of the world and all in it, including life itself, that I would not care if I heard this morning the flapping of the wings of the angel of death. And he has been flapping those grim wings to some purpose of late. Lucy's mother and Arthur's father, and now let me get on with my work. I duly relieved Van Helsing in his watch over Lucy. He wanted Arthur to go to rest also, but he refused at first. It was only when I told him that we should want him to help us during the day, and that we must not all break down, for want of rest, lest Lucy should suffer, that he agreed to go. Van Helsing was very kind to him. "Come, my child," he said. "Come with me. You are sick and weak, and have had much sorrow and much mental pain, as well as that tax on your strength, for we know of. That we know of. You must not be alone, for to be alone is to be full of fears and alarms. Come to the drawing room, where there is a big fire, and there are 2 sofas. You shall lie on one, and I on the other, and our sympathy will be comfort to each other, even though we do not speak, and even if we sleep." Arthur went off with him, casting back a longing look on Lucy's face, which lay low on her pillow, almost whiter than the lawn. She lay quite still, and I looked round the room to see that all was as it should be. I could see that the professor had carried out in this room, as in the other, his purpose of using the garlic. The whole of the window sashes reeked with it, and round Lucy's neck over the silk handkerchief which Van Helsing made her keep on was a rough chaplet of the same odorous flowers. Lucy was breathing somewhat strenuously, and her face was at its worst, for the open mouth showed the pale gums. Her teeth in the dim, uncertain light seemed longer and sharper than they had been in the morning. In particular, by some trick of the light, the canine teeth looked longer and sharper than the rest. I sat down by her, and presently she moved uneasily. At the same moment there came a sort of dull flapping or buffeting at the window. I went over to it softly and peeped out by the corner of the blind. There was a full moonlight, and I could see that the noise was made by a great bat, which wheeled round, doubtless attracted by the light, although so dim, and every now and again struck the window with its wings. When I came back to my seat, I found that Lucy had moved slightly, and had torn away the garlic flowers from her throat. I replaced them as well as I could, and sat watching her. Presently she woke, and I gave her food, as Van Helsing had prescribed. She took but a little, and that languidly. There did not seem to be with her now the unconscious struggle for life and strength that had hitherto so marked her illness. It struck me as curious that the moment she became conscious, she pressed the garlic flowers close to her. It was certainly odd that whenever she got into that lethargic state with the strenuous breathing, she put the flowers from her. But that when she waked, she clutched them close. There was no possibility of making any mistake about this, for in the long hours that followed, she had many spells of sleeping and waking, and repeated both actions many times. At 6 o'clock, Van Helsing came to relieve me. Arthur had then fallen into a doze, and he mercifully let him sleep on. When he saw Lucy's face, I could hear the hissing and draw of his breath, and he said to me in a sharp whisper, Draw up the blind. I want light. Then he bent down, and with his face almost touching Lucy's, examined her carefully. He removed the flowers and lifted the silk handkerchief from her throat. As he did so, he started back, and I could hear his ejaculation. Mein Gott. As it was smothered in his throat, I bent over and looked too, and as I noticed, some queer chill came over me. The wounds on the throat had absolutely disappeared. For fully 5 minutes Van Helsing stood looking at her, with his face at its sternest. Then he turned to me and said, She is dying. It will not be long now. It will be much difference. Mark me, whether she dies conscious or in her sleep. Wake that poor boy and let him come and see the last. He trusts us, and we have promised him. I went to the dining room and waked him. He was dazed for a moment, but then he saw the sunlight streaming in through the edges of the shutters. He thought he was late and expressed his fear. I assured him that Lucy was still asleep, but told him as gently as I could that both Van Helsing and I feared that the end was near. He covered his face with his hands and slid down on his knees by the sofa, where he remained perhaps a minute with his head buried, praying whilst his shoulders shook with grief. I took him by the hand and raised him up. Come, I said, my dear old fellow, summon all your fortitude. It will be best and easiest for her. When we came into Lucy's room, I could see that Van Helsing had, with his usual forethought, been putting matters straight and making everything look as pleasing as possible. He had even brushed Lucy's hair, so that it lay on the pillow in its usual sunny ripples. When we came into the room, she opened her eyes and, seeing him, whispered softly, Arthur, oh my love, I am so glad you have come. He was stooping to kiss her when Helsing mentioned him back. No, he whispered. Not yet. Hold her hand. He'll comfort her more. So Arthur took her hand and knelt beside her, and she looked her best, with all the soft lines matching the angelic beauty of her eyes. Then, gradually, her eyes closed, and she sank to sleep. For a little bit, her breast heaved softly, and her breast came and went like a tired child's. And then, insensibly, there came the strange change which I had noticed in the night. Her breathing grew strenuous. The mouth opened, and the pale gums drawn back made the teeth look longer and sharper than ever. In a sort of sleepwalking, vague, unconscious way, she opened her eyes, which were now dull and hard at once, and said in a soft, voluptuous voice, such as I had never heard from her lips. Arthur, oh my love, I am so glad you have. Come, kiss me. Arthur bent eagerly toward to kiss her, but at that instant Van Helsing, who, like me, had been startled by her voice, swooped upon him, and catching him by the neck with both hands, dragged him back with a fury of strength, which I never thought he could have possessed, and actually hurled him almost across the room. Not for your life, he said. Not for your living soul and hers. And he stood between them like a lion at bay. Arthur was so taken back that he did not for a moment know what to do or say, and before any impulse of violence could seize him, he realized the place and the occasion, and stood silent, waiting. I kept my eyes fixed on Lucy, as did Van Helsing, and we saw a spasm as of rage flit like a shadow over her face. The sharp teeth champed together, then her eyes closed, and she breathed heavily. Very short after she opened her eyes in all their softness, and putting out her poor, pale, thin hand, took Van Helsing's great brown one, drawing it to her. She kissed it. "My true friend," she said in a faint voice, but with untellable pathos. "My true friend, and his. Oh, guard him and give me peace." "I swear it," said he solemnly, kneeling beside her and holding up his hand, as one who registers an oath. Then he turned to Arthur and said to him, "Come, my child, take her hand in yours, and kiss her on the forehead, and only once." Their eyes met instead of their lips, and so they parted. Lucy's eyes closed, and Van Helsing, who had been watching closely, took Arthur's arm and drew him away. And then Lucy's breathing became strenuous again, and all at once it ceased. "It is all over," said Van Helsing. "She is dead." I took Arthur by the arm and led him away to the drawing room, where he sat down and covered his face with his hands, sobbing in a way that nearly broke me down to see. I went back to the room and found Van Helsing looking at poor Lucy, and his face was sterner than ever. Some change had come over her body. Death had given back part of her beauty, for her brow and cheeks had recovered some of their flowing lines. Even the lips had lost their deadly pallor. It was as if the blood no longer needed for the working of the heart had gone to make the harshness of death as little rude as might be. We thought her dying whilst she slept, and sleeping while she died. I stood beside Van Helsing and said, "Ah, well, poor girl, there is peace for her at last. It is the end." He turned to me and said with grave solemnity, "Not so, alas, not so. It is only the beginning." When I asked him what he meant, he only shook his head and answered, "We can do nothing as yet. Wait and see." Chapter 13. Dr. Seward's diary continued. The funeral was arranged for the next succeeding day, so that Lucy and her mother might be buried together. I attended to all the ghastly formalities, and the urbane undertaker proved that his staff were afflicted or blessed with something of his own ubiquitous faiety. Even the woman who performed the last offices for the dead remarked to me, in a confidential brother professional way, when she had come out from the death chamber.
She makes a very beautiful corpse, sir. It's quite a privilege to attend on her. It's not too much to say that she will do credit to our establishment.
I noticed that Van Helsing never kept far away. This was possible from the disorderly state of things in the household. There were no relatives at hand, and as Arthur had to be back the next day to attend at his father's funeral, we were unable to notify anyone who should have been bidden. Under the circumstances, Van Helsing and I took it upon ourselves to examine papers, etc. He insisted upon looking over Lucy's papers himself. I asked him why, for I feared that he, being a foreigner, might not be quite aware of English legal requirements, and so might in ignorance make some unnecessary trouble. He answered me, I know. You forget that I am a lawyer as well as a doctor, but this is not altogether for the law. You knew that when you avoided the coroner. I have more than him to avoid. There may be papers more such as this. As he spoke, he took from his pocketbook the memorandum, which had been in Lucy's breast, and which she had torn in her sleep. When you find anything of the solicitor who is for the late Miss Westerna, seal all her papers and write him tonight for me. I watch here in the room and in Miss Lucy's old room all night, and I myself search for what may be. It is not well that her very thoughts go into the hands of strangers. I went on with my part of the work, and in another half hour had found the name and addresses of Miss Westerna's solicitor, and had written to him. All the poor lady's papers were in order. Explicit directions regarding the place of burial were given. I had hardly sealed the letter, when to my surprise Van Helsing walked into the room, saying, Can I help you, friend John? I am free, and if I may, my service is to you. Have you got what you looked for? I asked, to which he replied, I did not look for any specific thing. I only hope to find, and find I have. All that there was, only some letters and a few memoranda, and a diary new begun. But I have them here, and we shall for the present say nothing of them. I shall see that poor lad tomorrow evening, and with his sanction I shall use some. When he had finished the work in hand, he said to me, And now, friend John, I think we may to bed. We want sleep, both you and I, and rest to recuperate. Tomorrow we shall have much to do, but for the tonight there is no need of us, alas. Before turning in, we went to look at poor Lucy. The undertaker had certainly done his work well, for the room was turned into a small chapelle ardente. There was a beautiful wilderness of beautiful white flowers, and death was made as little repulsive as might be. The end of the winding sheet was laid over the face,
When the professor bent over and turned it gently back, we both stared at the beauty before us, the tall wax candles showing a sufficient light to note it well. All Lucy's loveliness had come back to her in death, and the hours that had passed instead of leaving traces of decay's effacing fingers had but restored the beauty of life. Till positively I could not believe my eyes that I was looking at a corpse. The professor looked sternly grave. He had not loved her as I had, and there was no need for tears in his eyes. He said to me, "Remain till I return," and left the room. He came back with a handful of garlic from the box waiting in the hall, but which had not been opened, and placed the flowers amongst the others on and around the bed. On another, then he took from his neck, inside his collar, a little gold crucifix, and placed it over the mouth. He restored the sheet to its place, and we came away. I was undressing in my own room, when, with a premonitory tap at the door, he entered, and at once began to speak. "Tomorrow I want you to bring me, before night, a set of post-mortem knives." "Must we make an autopsy?" I asked. "Yes and no. I want to operate, but not as you think. Let me tell you now, but not a word to another. I want to cut off her head and take out her heart." "Ah, you, a surgeon, and so shocked. You whom I have seen with no tremble of hand or heart, do operations of life and death that make the rest shudder. Oh, but I must not forget, my dear friend Jean, that you loved her, and I have not forgotten it. For it is I that shall operate, and you must only help. I would like to do it tonight, but for Arthur I must not. He will be free after his father's funeral tomorrow, and he will want to see her, to see it. Then, when she is confined, ready for the next day, you and I shall come when all sleep. We shall unscrew the coffin lid, and shall do our operation, and then replace all, so that none know save we alone." "But why do it at all? The girl is dead. Why mutilate her poor body without need? And if there is no necessity for a post-mortem, and nothing to gain by it, no good to her, to us, to science, to human knowledge, why do it? Without such, it is monstrous." For answer, he put his hand on my shoulder and said without infinite tenderness, "Friend John, I pity your poor bleeding heart, and I love you the more for it, the more because of it. I love you the more because it does so bleed. If I could, I would take on myself the burden that you do bear. But there are things that you know not, but that you shall know." And bless me for knowing. "Though they are not pleasant things, John. My child, you have been my friend now many years, and yet, did you ever know me to do any without good cause? I am but man. But I believe in all I do. Was it not for these causes that you sent for me when the great trouble came?" "Yes,
Were you not amazed, nay, horrified, when I would not let Arthur kiss his love, though she was dying, and snatched him away by all my strength? Yes, and yet you saw how she thanked me, with her so beautiful dying eyes, her voice too so weak, and she kissed my rough old hand and blessed me. Yes, and did you not hear me swear promise to her that so she closed her eyes, grateful? Yes. Well, I have good reason. Now, for all I want to do, you have for many years trust me. You have believed me weeks past, when there be things so strange that you might have well doubt. Believe me yet a little, friend John. If you trust me not, then I must tell what I think, and and that is not perhaps well. And if I work as well as I shall, no matter trust or no trust, without my friend trust in me, I work with heavy heart and feel, oh, so lonely when I want all help and courage that may be. He paused a moment and went on solemnly. Friend John, there are strange and terrible days before us. Let us not be two but one, that so we work to a good end. Will you not have faith in me? I took his hand and promised him. I held my door open as he went away, and watched him go into his room and close the door. As I stood without moving, I saw one of the maids pass silently along the passage. She had her back towards me, so did not see me, and go into the room where Lucy lay. The sight touched me. Devotion is so rare, and we are so grateful to those who show it unasked to those we love. Here was a poor girl, putting aside the terrors which she naturally had of death, to go watch alone by the bier of the witch's mistress whom she loved, so that the poor clay may not be lonely, till laid to rest. 3 crosses. Must have slept long and soundly, for it was broad daylight when Van Helsing waked me by coming into my room. He came over to my bedside and said, "Need not trouble about the knives. We shall not do it." "Why not?" I asked, for his solemnity of the night before had greatly impressed me. "Because," he said sternly, "it is too late, or too early. See?" Here he had held up the little golden crucifix. "This was stolen in the night." "How stolen?" I asked in wonder. "Since you have it now." "Because I get it back from the worthless wretch who stole it, from the woman who robbed the dead and the living. Punishment will surely come, but not through me. She knew not altogether what she did, and thus unknowing she only stole. Now we must wait." He went away on the word, leaving me with a new mystery to think of, a new puzzle to grapple with. The forenoon was a dreary time, but at noon the solicitor came, Mr. Marquand of Holman, Sons, Marquand and Litterdale. He was very genial and very appreciative of what he had done, and took off our hands all cares as to details. During lunch he told us that Miss Watt Turner had for some time expected sudden death from her heart, and had put her affairs in absolute order. He informed us that with the exception of a certain entailed property of Lucy's father's, which now in default of direct issue went back to a distant branch of the family. The whole estate, real and personal, was left absolutely to Arthur Homewood. When he had told us so much, he went on. Frankly, we did our best to prevent such a Frankly, we did our best to prevent such a testimony disposition and pointed out certain contingencies that might leave our daughter either penniless or not so free as she should be to act regarding a matrimonial alliance. Indeed, we pressed the matter so far that we almost came into collision, for she asked if we were or were not prepared to carry out her wishes. Of course, we had then no alternative but to accept. We were right in principle, and 99 times out of 100 we should have proved, by the logic of events, the accuracy of our judgment. Frankly, however, I must admit that in this case any other form of disposition would have been rendered impossible that the carrying out of her wishes. For her preceding her daughter, the latter would have come into possession of the property, and even had she only survived her mother by 5 minutes, her property would, in case there were no wheel, and a wheel was a practical impossibility in such a case, had been treated at her decrease as under intensity. Intestacy. In which case, Lord Godalming, though so dear a friend, would have had no claim in the world, and the interiors, being remote, would not be likely to abandon their just rights, for sentimental reasons regarding an entire stranger. I assure you, my dear sirs, I am rejoiced as the result, perfectly rejoiced. He was a good fellow, but his rejoicing at the one little part in which he was officially interested of so great a tragedy was an object lesson in the limitations of sympathetic understanding. He did not remain long, but said he would look in later in the day and see Lord Godalming. His coming, however, had been a certain comfort to us, since it assured us that we should not have to dread hostile criticism. As to any of our acts, Arthur was expected at 5 o'clock, so a little before that time we visited the death chamber. It was so in a very truth, for now both mother and daughter lay in it. The undertaker, true to his craft, had made the best display he could of his goods, and there was a mortuary air about the place that lowered our spirits at once. Van Helsing ordered the former arrangement to be adhered to, explaining that as Lord Godalming was coming very soon, it would be less narrowing to find his feelings to see all that was left to his fiancée quite alone. The undertaker seemed shocked at his own stupidity, and exerted himself to restore things to the condition in which we left them the night before, so that when Arthur came, such shocks to his feelings as we could avoid were saved. Poor fellow, he looked desperately sad and broken. Even his stalwart manhood seemed to have shrunk somewhat under the strain of his much-tried emotions. He had, I knew, been very genuinely and devotedly attached to his father, and to lose him at such a time was a bitter blow to him. With me he was warm as ever, and to Van Helsing He was sweetly courteous, but I could not help seeing that there was some constraint with him. The professor noticed it, too, and motioned me to bring him upstairs. I did so and left him at the door of the room, as I felt he would like to be quite alone with her. But he took his arm and led me in, saying huskily, "I loved her too, old fellow." See, this is why I prefer people to go ahead and say, instead of he so much, him, so that we actually know who is we're talking about. I prefer them to just go ahead and say the name. But anyway, but he took my arm and led me in, saying huskily, "You loved her too, old fellow. She told me all about it, and there was no friend had a closer place in her heart than you. I don't know how to thank you for all you have done for her. I can't think of yet." Here he suddenly broke down and threw his arms around my shoulders and lay his head on my breast, crying, "Oh, Jack, Jack, what shall I do? The whole of life seems gone from me, all at once, and there is nothing in the wide world for me to live for." I comforted him as well as I could. In such cases, men do not need much expression. A grip of the hand, the tightening of an arm over the shoulder, a sob in unison are expressions of sympathy, dear to a man's heart. I stood still and silent till his sobs died away, and then I said softly to him, "Come and look at her." Together we moved over to the bed, and I lifted the lawn from her face. God, how beautiful she was! Every hour seemed to be enhancing her loveliness. It frightened and amazed me somewhat, and as for Arthur, he fell a trembling, and finally was shaken with doubt, as with an ague. At last, after a long pause, he said to me in a faint whisper, "Jack, is she really dead?" "Jack, is she really dead?" I assured him sadly that it was so, and went on to suggest, for I felt that such a horrible doubt should not have life for a moment longer than I could help, that it often happened that after death faces became softened and even resolved into their youthful beauty, that this was especially so when death had been preceded by any acute or prolonged suffering. It seemed to quite do away with any doubt. And after kneeling beside the couch for a while, and looking at her lovingly and long, he turned aside. I told him that must be goodbye, as the coffin had to be prepared. So he went back and took her dead hand in his, and kissed it, and bent over and kissed her forehead. He came away fondly, looking back over his shoulder at her as he came. I left him in the drawing room, and told Van Helsing that he had said goodbye. So the latter went to the kitchen to tell the undertaker's men to proceed with the preparations and to screw up the coffin. When he came out of the room again, I told him of Arthur's question, and he replied, "I am not surprised. Just now I doubted for a moment myself." We all dined together, and I could see that poor Art was trying to make the best of things. Van Helsing had been silent all dinner time, but when we had lit our cigars, he said, "Lord." But Arthur interrupted him. "No, no, not that. For God's sake, not yet. At any rate, forgive me, sir. I did not mean to speak offensively. It is only because my loss is so recent." The professor answered very sweetly, "I only used that name because I was in doubt. I must not call you Mister, and I have grown to love you. Yes, my dear boy, to love you as Arthur." Arthur held out his hand and took the old man's warmly. "Call me what you will," he said. "I hope I may always have the title of friend. And let me say that I am at a loss for words to thank you for your goodness to my poor dear." He paused a moment and went on. "I know that she understood your goodness even better than I do, and if I was rude or in any way wanton at that time, you acted, so you remember." The professor nodded. "You must forgive me," he answered with a grave kindness. "I know it was hard for you to quite trust me then. For to trust such violence needs to understand, and I take it that you do not. That you cannot trust me now, for you do not yet understand, and there may be more times when I shall want you to trust when you cannot, and may not, and must not yet understand. But the time will come when your trust shall be whole and complete in me, and when you shall understand as though the sunlight himself shone through. Then you shall bless me from first to last for your own sake, and for the sake of others, and for her dear sake, to whom I swore to protect." "And indeed, sir," said Arthur warmly, "I shall in all ways trust you. I know and believe you have a very noble heart, and you are Jack's friend, and you were hers. I shall do what you like." The professor cleared his throat a couple of times, as though about to speak, and finally said, "May I ask you something now?" "Certainly." "You know that Miss Westerner left you all her property?" "No, poor dear. I never thought of it." "And as it is all yours, you have a right to do with it as you will. I want you to give me permission to read all Miss Lucy's papers and letters. Believe me, it is no idle curiosity. I have a motive of which, be sure, she would have approved. I have them all here. I took them before you knew that all was yours, so that no strange hand might touch them, no strange eye look through words into her soul. I shall keep them, if I may. Even you may not see them yet, but I shall keep them safe. No word shall be lost, and in the good time I shall give them back to you. It's a hard thing, I ask, but you will do it will you not, for Lucy's sake?" Arthur spoke out haughtily, like his old self. "Dr. Van Helsing, you may do what you will. I feel that in saying this I am doing what my dear one would have approved. I shall not trouble you with questions till the time comes." The old professor, stood up as he said solemnly, "And you are right. There will be a pain for us all, but it will not be all pain, nor will this pain be the last. We and you too, you must most of all, my dear boy, will have to pass through the bitter winter of bitter water before we reach the sweet. But we must be brave of heart and unselfish, and do our duty, and all will be well. I slept on a sofa in Arthur's room that night. Van Helsing did not go to bed at all. He went to and fro as if patrolling the house, and was never out of sight of the room where Lucy lay in her coffin, strewn with the wild garlic flowers, which sent through the odor of lily and rose a heavily overpowering smell into the night.
Mina Harker's journal, 22nd of September. In the train to Exeter, Jonathan sleeping. It seems only yesterday that the last entry was made, and yet how much between then in Whitby and all the world before me. Jonathan away and no news of him, and now married to Jonathan, a solicitor, a partner, rich, master of his business. Mr. Hawkins dead and buried, and Jonathan with another attack that may harm him. Some day he may ask me about it.
Gonna take a commercial break here, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Down it all goes. I am rusty in my shorthand. See what unexpected prosperity does for us. So it may be as well to freshen it up again with an exercise anyhow. Oh, okay. I felt a little different to be speaking that voice for whatever reason. And it was,
Down it all goes. I am resting my shorthand. See what unexpected prosperity does for us. So it may be as well to freshen it up again with an exercise anyhow. The service was very simple and very solemn. There were only ourselves and the servants there, one or two old friends of his from Exeter, his London agent, and a gentleman representing Sir John Paxton, the president of the Incorporation Law Society. Jonathan and I stood hand in hand, and we felt that our best and dearest friend was gone from us. We came back to town quietly, taking a bus to Hyde Park Corner. Jonathan thought it would interest me to go into the Row for a while, so we sat down, but there were very few people there, and it was sad looking and desolate to see so many empty chairs. It made us think of the empty chair at home. We got so we got up and walked down Piccadilly. Jonathan was holding me by the arm, the way he used to in the old days before I went to school. I felt it very important, for you can't go on for some years and teaching etiquette and decorum to other girls without the pedantry of it biting into yourself a bit. But it was Jonathan, and he was my husband, and we didn't know anybody who saw us, and we didn't care if they did. So on we walked. I was looking at a very beautiful girl in a big cartwheel hat, sitting in a Victoria outside Giolino's, when I felt Jonathan clutch my arm so tight that he hurt me, and he said under his breath, "My God." I am always anxious about Jonathan, for I fear that some nervous fit may upset him again. So I turned to him quickly and asked him what it was that disturbed him. He was very pale, and his eyes seemed bulging out as half in terror and half in amazement. He gazed at a tall, thin man with a beaky nose and black mustache and pointed beard, who was also observing the pretty girl. He was looking at her so hard that he did not see either of us, and so I had a good view of him. His face was not a good face. It was hard and cruel and sensual, and his big white teeth, that looked all the whiter because his lips were so red, were pointed like an animal's. Jonathan kept staring at him till I was afraid he would notice. I feared he might take it ill. He looked so fierce and nasty. I asked Jonathan why he was disturbed, and he answered evidently thinking that I knew as much about it as he did.
Do you not see who it is?
"No, dear," I said. I don't know him. Who is it?" His answer seemed to shock and thrill me, for it was said as if he did not know that it was to me, Mina, to whom he was speaking.
It is the man himself.
The poor dear was evidently terrified at something, very greatly terrified. I do believe that if he had not had me to lean on and to support him, he would have sunk down. He kept staring. A man came out of the shop with a small parcel and gave it to the lady, who then drove off. The dark man kept his eyes fixed on her, and when the carriage moved up Piccadilly, he followed in the same direction and hailed a hansom. Jonathan kept looking after him. He said, as if to himself, "I can't believe it is the Count. But he has grown young. My God, if this be so. Oh my God, if I only knew. If I only knew." He was distressing himself so much that I feared to keep his mind on the subject by asking him any question, so I remained silent. I drew him away quietly, and he, holding my arm, came easily. We walked a little further and then went in and sat for a while in the green park. It was a hot day for autumn, and there was a comfortable seat in a shady place. After a few minutes staring at nothing, Jonathan's eyes closed and he went quickly into sleep, with his head on my shoulder. I thought it was the best thing for him, so did not disturb him. In about 20 minutes he woke up and said to me quite cheerfully,
Why, Mina, have I been asleep? Oh, do forgive me for being so rude.
Come,
Come and we'll have a cup of tea somewhere.
he had evidently forgotten all about the dark stranger, as in his illness he had forgotten all that this episode had reminded him of. I don't like this lapsing into forgetfulness. It may make or continue some injury to the brain. I must not ask him, for fear I shall do more harm than good, but I must somehow learn the facts of his journey abroad. The time has come, I fear, when I must open that parcel and know what is written. Oh, Jonathan, you will, I know, forgive me if I do wrong, but it is for your own dear sake. Later, a sad homecoming in every way. The house empty of the dear soul who was so good to us. Jonathan still pale and dizzy under a slight relapse of his malady. And now, a telegram from Van Helsing, whoever he may be.
You'll be grieved to hear that Miss Westerna died 5 days ago, and that Lucy died the day before yesterday. They were both buried today.
Oh, what a wealth of sorrow in a few words. Poor Miss Westerna, poor Lucy, gone, never to return to us, and poor Arthur, to have lost such sweetness out in his life. God help us all to bear our troubles.
Dr. Seward's Diary. 22nd of September. It is all over. Arthur has gone back to Ring, and has taken Quincy Morris with him. What a fine fellow is Quincy. I believe in my heart of hearts that he suffered as much about Lucy's death as any of us, but he bore himself through it like a moral Viking. If America can go on breeding men like that, she will be a power in the world indeed. Van Helsing is lying down, having a rest preparatory to his journey. He goes over to Amsterdam tonight, but says he returns tomorrow night, that he only wants to make some arrangements, which can only be made personally. He is to stop with me then, if he can. He says he has work to do in London, which may take him some time. Poor old fellow, I fear that the strain of the past has broken him down. Even his iron strength, all the time of the burial, he was, I could see, putting some terrible restraint on himself. When it was all over, we were standing beside Arthur, who, poor fellow, was speaking of his part in the operation, where his blood had been transfused to his Lucy's veins. I could see Van Helsing's face grow white and purple by turns. Arthur was saying that he felt since then as if they two had been really married, and that she was his wife in the sight of God. None of us said a word of the other operations, and none of us ever shall. Arthur and Quincy went away together to the station, and Van Helsing and I came on here. The moment we were alone in the carriage, he gave way to a regular fit of hysterics. He has denied to me since that it was hysterics, but insisted that it was only his sense of humor asserting itself under very terrible conditions. He laughed till he cried, and I had to draw down the blinds, lest anyone should see us and misjudge And then he cried till he laughed again, and laughed and cried together, just as a woman does. Shrugs. I tried to be stern with him, as one is to a woman. Shrugs again. That's just me just shrugging, like, what? Under the circumstances, but it had no effect. Men and women are so different in manifestations of nervous strength or weakness. Then, when his face grew grave and stern again, I asked him why his mirth, and why at such a time. His reply was in a way characteristic of him, for it was logical and forceful and mysterious. He said, "Ah, you don't comprehend, friend John. Do you not think I am not sad, though I laugh? See, I have cried, even when the laugh did choke me. But no more think that I am all sorry when I cry. For the laugh he come, just the same. Keep it always with you that laughter who knock at your door and say, 'May I come in?' is not this true laughter. No, he is a king, and he come when and how he like. He ask no person, he choose no time to suitability. He say, 'I am here. Behold an example I grieve my heart out for that so sweet young girl.' I give my blood for her, though I am old and worn. I give my time, my skill, my sleep. I let my other sufferers want that so she may have all. And yet I can laugh at her very grave laugh when the clay from the spade of the sexton drop upon her coffin and say, thud, thud, to my heart, till it send back the blood from my cheek. My heart bleed for that poor boy, that dear boy. So, of the age of mine own boy, had I been so blessed that he live, and with his hair and eyes the same. There you know now why I love him so. And yet, when he say things that touch my husband heart to the quick, and make my father heart yearn to him, as to no other man, not even to you, dear friend John. For we are more level in experiences than father and son. Yet, even at such moment, King laugh. He came to me and shout, and blow in my ear, here I am, till the blood come dance back, and bring some of the sunshine that he carry with him to my cheek. Oh, friend John, it is a strange world, a sad world, a world full of miseries and woes, and trouble, and yet when King laugh, come he make them all dance to the tune he play. Bleeding hearts and dry bones of the churchyard, tears that burn as they fall, all dance together to the music that he make with that smileless mouth of him. And believe me, friend John, that he is good to come, and kind. Ah, we men and women are like ropes drawn tight with strain, that pull us different ways. Then tear come, and like the rain on the ropes, they brace us up, until perhaps the strain become too great, and we break. But King laugh, he come like the sunshine, and he ease off the strain again, and we bear to go on with our labor, what it may be. I did not like to wound him by pretending not to see his idea, but as I did not yet understand the cause of his laughter, I asked him. As he answered me, his face grew stern, and he said in quite a different tone, "Oh, it was the grim irony of it all. This so lovely lady garlanded with flowers, that looked so fair as life, till one by one we wondered if she were truly dead. She laid in that so fine marble house in that lonely churchyard, where rest so many of her kin, laid there with a mother who loved her and whom she loved, and that sacred bell going toll, toll, toll. So sad and slow, and those holy men with the white garments of the angel, pretending to read books, and yet all the time their eyes never on the page. And all of us with a bowed head, and all for what? She is dead. So, is it not? Well, for the life of me, Professor, I said, I can't see anything to laugh at in all that. Why, your explanation makes it a harder puzzle than before. But even if the burial service was comic, what about poor Art and his troubles? Why, his heart was simply breaking. Just so. Said he not that the transfusion of his blood onto her veins had made her truly his bride? Yes, and it was a sweet and comforting idea for him. Quite so. But there was a difficulty, friend John. If so, then what about the others? Oh, then this so sweet maid is a polyandrist, and me, with my poor wife dead to me, but alive but by church's law, though no wits all gone, even I, who am faithful husband to this now no wife, am a bigamist. I don't see where the joke comes in there either, I said, and I did not feel particularly pleased with him for saying such things. He laid his hand on my arm and said, Friend John, forgive me by pain. I showed not my feelings to others when it would wound, but only to you, my old friend, whom I can trust. If you could have looked into my very heart then, when I want to laugh, if you could have done so when the laugh arrived, if you could do so now when King laugh, have pack up all his crown and all that is to him, for he go far, far away from me, and for a long, long time. Maybe you would perhaps pity me the most of all. I was touched by the tenderness of his tone, and asked why. Because I know. And now we are all scattered, and for many a long day loneliness will sit over our roofs with brooding wings. Lucy lies in the tomb of her kin, a lordly death house in a lonely churchyard away from teeming London, where the air is fresh and the sun rises over the Hampstead Hill, and where wild flowers grow of their own accord. So I can finish this diary, and God only knows if I shall ever begin another. If I do, if I even open this again, it will be to deal with different people and different themes. For here at the end, where the romance of my life is told, ere I go back to take up the thread of my life work, I say sadly and without hope, Finney. The Westminster Gazette, 25th of September, a Hampstead mystery. The neighborhood of Hampstead is just at present exercised with a series of events which seem to run on lines parallel to those of what was known to the writers of headlines as the Kensington Horror, or the Stabbing Woman, or the Woman in Black. During the past 2 or 3 days, several cases have occurred of young children straying from home or neglected to return from their playing on the heath. In all these cases, the children were too young to give any properly intelligible account of themselves, but the consensus of their excuses is that they had been with a bloofer lady. It has always been late in the evening when they have been missed, and on 2 occasions the children have not been found until early in the following morning. It is generally supposed in the neighborhood that, as the first child missed, gave as his reason for being away that a blue fur lady had asked him to come for a walk. The others had picked up the phrase and used it on this occasion served. This is the more natural as the favorite game of the little ones at present is luring each other away by wiles. The correspondent writes us that to see some of the tiny dots pretending to be the blue fur lady is supremely funny. Some of our characteristics, some of our characters might be, mighty says, take a lesson in the irony of grotesque by comparing the reality and the picture. It is only in accordance with general principles by human nature that the blue fur lady should be the popular role at these al fresco performances. Our correspondence naively says that even Ellen Terry could not be so winningly attractive as some of these grubby-faced little children pretend, and even imagine themselves to be. There is, however, possibly a serious side to the questions for some of the children. Indeed, all who have been missed at night have been slightly torn or wounded in the throat. The wounds seem such as might be made by a rat or a small dog. And although of not much importance, individually would tend to show that whatever animal inflicts them has a system of methods of its own. The police of this division have been instructed to keep a sharp lookout for straying children, especially when very young, in and around Hampstead Heath, and for any stray dog which may be about. The Westminster Gazette, 25th of September, extra special. The Hampstead Horror, another child injured. The Blue Fur Lady. We have just received intelligence that another child missed last night was only discovered late in the morning under a furze bush at the Shooter's Hill side of Hampstead Heath, which is perhaps less frequented than the other parts and has the same tiny wound in the throat as has been noticed in other cases. It was terribly weak and looked quite emaciated, it too. When partially restored, had the common story to tell of being lured away by the Blue Fur Lady. Chapter 14. Mina Harker's Journal. 23rd of September. Jonathan is better after a bad night. I'm so glad that he has plenty of work to do, for that keeps his mind off the terrible things. And oh, I am rejoiced that he is not now weighed down with the responsibility of his new position. I knew he would be true to himself, and now how proud I am to see my Jonathan rising to the height of his advancement, and keeping pace in all ways with the duties that come upon him. He will be away all day till late, for he said he could not lunch at home. My household work is done, so I shall take his foreign journal and lock myself up in my room and read it. 24th of September. I hadn't the heart to write last night. That terrible record of Jonathan's upset me so. Poor dear. How he must have suffered, whether it be true or only imagination. I wonder if there is any truth in it at all. Did he get his brain fever and then write all those terrible things, or had he some cause for it all? I suppose I shall never know, for I dare not open the subject to him. And yet that man we saw yesterday, he seemed quite certain of him. Poor fellow, I suppose it was the funeral upset him and sent his mind back on some train of thought. He believes it all himself. I remember how on our wedding day he said, "Unless some solemn duty come upon me, I go back to the bitter hours, asleep or awake, mad or sane." There seems to be through it all some thread of continuity. That fearful Count was coming to London, if it should be, and he came to London with his teeming millions. There may be a solemn duty, and if it come we must not shrink from it. I shall be prepared. I shall get my typewriter this very hour,
and begin transcribing, when we shall be ready for other eyes if required, and if it be so wanted, then perhaps if I am ready, poor Jonathan may not be upset, for I can speak to him, and never let him be troubled or worried with it at all. If ever Jonathan quite gets over the nervousness, he may want to tell me of it all, and I can ask him questions and find out things, and see how I may comfort him.
Letter Van Helsing to Miss Harker, 24th of September. Confidence. Dear Madam, I pray you to pardon my writing, in that I am so far friend, as that I sent to you sad news of Miss Lucy Westerna's death. By the kindness of Lord Godalming, I am empowered to read her letters and papers, for I am deeply concerned about certain matters vitally important in them. I find some letters from you, which show how great friends you were, and how you love her. Oh, Madam Mina, by that love, I implore you, help me. It is for others' good that I ask to redress great wrong, and to lift much and terrible troubles, that may be more great than you can know. May it be that I see you? You can trust me. I am friend of Dr. John Seward, and of Lord Godalming. That was Arthur of Miss Lucy. I must keep it private for the present from all. I should come to Exeter to see you at once, if you tell me I am privileged to come, and where and when. I implore your pardon, madam. I have read your letters to poor Lucy, and I know how good you are, and how your husband suffered. So I pray you, if it may be, enlighten him, not lest it may harm again your pardon and forgive me. Van Helsing. Telegram, Miss Harker to Van Helsing.
25th of September. Come today by 10:15 train if you can. Catch it. Can see you any time you call. Wilhelmina Harker. Mina Harker's Journal, 25th of September. I cannot help feeling terribly excited as the time draws near for the visit of Dr. Van Helsing. For somehow I expect that it will throw some light upon Jonathan's sad experience, and as he attended poor dear Lucy in her last illness, he can tell me all about her. That is the reason of his coming. It is concerning Lucy and her sleepwalking, and not about Jonathan. Then I shall never know the real truth now. How silly I am. That awful journal gets hold of my imagination and tinges everything with something of its own color. Of course it is about Lucy that habit came back to the poor dear, and that awful night on the cliff must have made her ill. I had almost forgotten in my own affairs how ill she was afterwards. She must have told him of her sleepwalking adventure on the cliff, and that I knew all about it. And now he wants me to tell him what she knows, so that he may understand. I hope I did right in not saying anything of it to Miss Westerna. I should never give myself if any act of mine were I should never forgive myself if any act of mine, were it even a negative one, brought harm on poor dear Lucy. I hope, too, Dr. Van Helsing will not blame me. I have had so much trouble and anxiety of late that I feel I cannot bear more just at present. I suppose a cry does us all good at times, clears the air as other rain does. Perhaps it was reading the journal yesterday that upset me, and then Jonathan went away this morning to stay away from me a whole day and night, the first time we have been parted since our marriage. I do hope the dear fellow will take care of himself, and that nothing will occur to upset him. It is 2:00, and the doctor will be here soon. I shall say nothing of Jonathan's journal unless he asks me. I'm so glad I have typewritten out my own journal, so that in case he asks about Lucy, I can hand it to him. It will save much questioning. Later, he has come and gone. Oh, what a strange meeting, and how it all makes my head whirl around. I feel like one in a dream. Can it be all possible? Or even a part of it? If I had not read Jonathan's journal first, I should never have accepted even a possibility. Poor dear Jonathan, how he must have suffered. Please the good God, all this may not upset him again. I shall try to save him from it, but it may be even a consolation and a help to him. Terrible though it may be, and awful in its consequences, to know for certain that his eyes and ears and brain did not deceive him, and that it is all true. It may be that it is the doubt which haunts him, that when the doubt is removed, no matter which, waking or dreaming, may prove the truth, he will be more satisfied and better able to bear the shock. Dr. Van Helsing must be a good man, as well as a clever one, if he is Arthur's friend and Dr. Seward's. And if they brought him all the way from Holland to look after Lucy, I feel from having seen him that he is good and kind and of a noble nature. When he comes tomorrow, I shall ask him about Jonathan, and then, please God, all this sorrow and anxiety may lead to a good end. I used to think I would like to practice interviewing Jonathan's friend on the Exeter News, told him that memory was everything in such work, that you must be able to put down exactly almost every word spoken, even if you had to refine some of it afterwards. Here was a rare interview. I shall try to record it in verbatim. It was 2:30 when the knock came. I took my courage, adieu, means, and waited. In a few minutes, Mary opened the door and announced Dr. Van Helsing. I rose and bowed, and he came towards me, a man of medium weight, strongly built, and with his shoulders set back over a broad, deep chest, and a neck well balanced on the trunk, as the head is on the neck. The poise of the head strikes one at once as indicative of thought and power. The head is noble, well sized, broad, and large behind the ears. The face, clean shaven, shows a hard, square chin, a large, resolute, mobile mouth, a good-sized nose, rather straight but with quick, sensitive nostrils that seem to broaden as the big, bushy brows come down and the mouth tightens. The forehead is broad and fine, rising at first almost straight, and then sloping back above two bumps, or ridges wide apart, such a forehead that the reddish hair cannot possibly tumble over it, but falls naturally back and to the sides. Big, dark blue eyes are set widely apart, and are quick and tender or stern with a man's moods. He said to me,
Miss Archer, is it not?
I bowed assent.
That was Miss Mina Murray?
Again, I assented. It is Mina Murray that I came to see.
It is Mina Murray that I came to see. That was friend of that poor dear child Lucy Westerna. Madam Mina, it is on account of the dead I come.
Sir, I said, you could have no better claim on me than that you were a friend and helper of Lucy Westerna. And I held out my hand. He took it and said tenderly,
Oh, Madam Mina, I knew that the friend of that poor Lily girl must be good, but I had yet to learn.
He finished his speech with a courtly bow. I asked him what it was that he wanted to see me about, so he at once began.
I have read your letters to Miss Lucy. Forgive me, but I had to begin to inquire somewhere, and there was none to ask. I know that you were with her at Whitby. She sometimes kept a diary. You need not look surprised, Madam Mina. It was begun after you had left, and it was made in imitation of you. And in that diary, she traces by inference certain things to a sleepwalking in which she puts down what you saved her. In great perplexity that I come to you and ask you out of your so much kindness to tell me all of it that you remember.
I can tell you, I think, Dr. Van Helsing, all about it.
Ah, then you have good memory for facts, for details. It is not always so with young ladies.
No, Doctor, but I wrote it all down at the time. I can show it to you if you like.
Oh, Madam Mina, I will be grateful you will do me such much favor.
I could not resist the temptation of mystifying him a bit. I suppose it is some of the taste of the original apple that remains still in our mouths, so I handed him the shorthand diary. He took it with a grateful bow, and I said,
May I read it?
"If you wish," I answered as demurely as I could. He opened it, and for an instant his face fell. Then he stood up and bowed.
Oh, you so clever woman.
He said,
I long knew that Mr. Jonathan was a man of much thankfulness, but see his wife have all the good things, and will you not so much honor me and so help me as to read it for me? Alas, I know not the shorthand.
By this time my little joke was over, and I was almost ashamed, so I took the typewritten copy from my work basket and handed it to him. Forgive me, I said. I could not help it, but I had been thinking about it, thinking that it was of dear Lucy that you wished to ask, and so that you might not have to wait, not on my account, but because I know your time must be precious. I've written it out for you on the typewriter for you. He took it, and his eyes glistened.
You are so good,
He said,
and may I read it now? I may want to ask you some things when I have read it.
By all means, I said. Read it over whilst I order lunch, and then you can ask me questions whilst we eat. He bowed and settled himself in a chair with his back to the light, and became absorbed in the papers whilst I went to see after lunch, chiefly in order that he might not be disturbed. When I came back, I found him walking hurriedly up and down the room, his face all ablaze with excitement. He rushed up to me and took me by both hands.
Oh, Madam Mina,
He said,
how can I say what I owe to you? This paper is as sunshine. It opens the gate to me. I am dazed. I am dazzled with so much light, and yet clouds roll in behind light every time. But you do not cannot comprehend. Oh, but I am so grateful to you. You so clever woman, madam.
He said this very solemnly.
If ever Abraham Van Helsing can do anything for you or yours, I trust you will let me know. It will be pleasure and delight if I may serve you as a friend. But all I have ever learned, all I can ever do, shall be for you and those you love. There are darknesses and light, and there are lights. You are one of the lights. You will have happy life and good life, and your husband will be blessed in you.
But doctor, you praise me too much, and you do not know me.
Not know you. I, who am old and who have studied all my life, men and women. I who have made my specialty the brain and all that belongs to him, and all that follow from him. And I have read your diary and that you have so goodly written for me, and which reads out truth in every line. I, who have read your so sweet letter to poor Lucy of your marriage and your trust, not know you. Oh, Madamine, good women tell all of their lives, and by day and by hour and by minute, such things that angels can read, and we men who wish to know have in us something of angels' eyes. Your husband is noble nature, and you are noble too, for you trust, and trust cannot be where there is mean nature. And your husband, tell me of him. Is he quite well? Is all that fever gone, and is he strong and hearty?
I saw here an opening to ask him about Jonathan, so I said, he was almost recovered, but he has been greatly upset by Mr. Hawkins' death. He interrupted.
Oh yes, I know. I know. I have read your last two letters.
I went on. I suppose this upset him, for when we were in town on Thursday last, he had a sort of a shock.
A shock?
And after brain
A shock, and after brain fever so soon, that was not good. What kind of shock was it?
he thought he saw someone who recalled something terrible, something from which led to his brain fever. And here the whole thing seemed to overwhelm me in a rush. The pity for Jonathan, the horror which he experienced, the whole fearful mystery of his diary, and the fear that has been brooding over me ever since, all came in a tumult. I suppose I was hysterical, for I threw myself on my knees and held up my hands to him, and implored him to make my husband well again. He took my hands and raised me up, and made me sit on the sofa, and sat by me. He held my hand in his, and said to me with such infinite sweetness,
My life is a barren and lonely one, and so full of work that I have not had such much time for friendships. Since I have been summoned here by my friend John Seward, I have known so many good people and seen such nobility that I feel more than ever, and it has grown with me advancing years. The loneliness of my life, believe me, then that I come here full of respect for you, and you have given me hope, not in what I am seeking of, but that there are good women still left to make life happy, good women whose lives and whose truths may make good lesson for the children that are to be. I am glad that I may here be of some use to you. For if your husband suffer, he suffer within the range of my study, and experience. I promise you that I will gladly do all for him that I can, all to make his life strong and manly, and your life a happy one. Now you must eat. You are overwrought and perhaps over anxious. Husband Jonathan would not like to see you so pale, and what he like not, where he love, is not to his good. Therefore, for his sake, you must eat and smile. You have told me all about Lucy, and so now we shall not speak of it. Lest it distress, I shall stay in Exeter tonight, for I want to think much over what you have told me. And when I have thought, I will ask you questions, if I may, and then too you will tell me of husband Jonathan's trouble, so far as you can, but not yet. You must eat now. Afterwards, you shall tell me all.
After lunch, when went back to the drawing room, he said to me,
And now tell me all about him.
when it came to speaking to this great learned man, I began to fear that he would think me a weak fool, and Jonathan a madman. That journal is all so strange, and I hesitated to go on, but he was so sweet. and kind, and he had promised to help, and I trusted him, so I said, Dr. Van Helsing, what I have to tell you is so queer that you must not laugh at me or at my husband. I have been since yesterday in a sort of fever of doubt. You must be kind to me and not think of me foolish, that I have even half believed some very strange things. He reassured me by his manner as well as his words when he said,
Oh, my dear, if you only knew how strange is the matter regarding which I am here. It is you who would laugh. I have learned not to think little of anyone's belief, no matter how strange it be. I have tried to keep an open mind, and it is not the ordinary things of life that could close it, but the strange things, the extraordinary things, the things that make one doubt if they be mad or sane.
Thank you. Thank you 1,000 times. You have taken a weight off my mind. If you will, if you will, let me. I shall give you a paper to read. It is long, but I have typewritten it out. If you tell me my trouble and Jonathan's, it is copy of his journal when abroad, and all that happened. I dare not say anything of it. You will read for yourself and judge, and then when I see you, perhaps you will be very kind and tell me what you think.
I promise.
He said, as I gave him the papers,
I shall in the morning, so soon as I can, come to see you and your husband, if I may.
Jonathan will be here at 11:30, and you must come to lunch with us, and see him then. You could catch the quick 3:34 train, which will leave you at Paddington before 8. He was surprised at my knowledge of the trains offhand, but he does not know that I have made up all the trains to and from Exeter, so that I may help Jonathan in case he is in a hurry. So he took the papers with him and went away, and I sit here thinking I don't know what.
Letter by hand, Van Helsing to Miss Harker. 25th of September, 6 o'clock. Dear Madamina, I have read your husband's so wonderful diary. You may sleep without doubt. Strange and terrible as it is true. I will pledge my life on it. It will be worse. It may be worse for others, but for him and you there is no dread. He is a noble fellow, and let me tell you from experience of men that one who would do as he did in going down that wall and to that room, and going a second time, is not one to be injured in permanence by a shock. His brain and his heart are all right. That I swear. Before I have even seen him, so be at rest. I shall have much to ask him of other things. I am blessed that today I come to see you, for I have learned all at once so much that again I am dazzle more than ever, and I must think. Yours, the most faithful, Abraham Van Helsing.
Letter, Miss Harker to Van Helsing, 25th of September, 6:30 p.m. My dear Dr. Van Helsing, 1,000 thanks for your kind letter, which has taken a great weight off my mind. And yet, if it be true, what terrible things there are in the world, and what an awful thing if that monster be really in London. I fear to think I have this moment, whilst writing, had a wire from Jonathan saying that he leaves by 6:25 tonight from Launceston, and will be here at 10:18, so that I shall have no fear tonight. Will you, therefore, instead of lunching with us, please come to breakfast at 8 o'clock? If this be not too early for you, you can get away if you are in a hurry by the 10:30 train, which will bring you to Paddington by 2:35. Do not answer this, as I shall take it that, if I do not hear, you will come to breakfast. Believe me, your faithful and grateful friend, Mina Harker.
Jonathan Harker's journal, 26th of September. I thought never to write in this diary again, but the time has come. When I got home last night, Mina had supper ready. And when we had supped, she told me of Van Helsing's visit, and of her having given him the 2 diaries copied out, and of how anxious she has been about me. She showed me in the doctor's letter that all I wrote down was true. It seems to have made a new man of me. It was the doubt as to the real reality of the whole thing that knocked me over. I felt impotent and in the dark and distrustful. But now that I know, I am not afraid, even of the Count. He has succeeded, after all, then in his design in getting to London, and it was he I saw. He has got younger, and how? Van Helsing is the man to unmask him and hunt him down. If he is anything like what Mina says, we sat late and talked it all over. Mina is dressing, and I shall call at the hotel in a few minutes and bring him over. He was, I think, surprised to see me when I came into the room where he was and introduced myself. He took me by the shoulder and turned my face round to the light and said after a sharp scrutiny, "But Madame Mina told me you were ill, that you had had a shock." It was so funny to hear my wife called Madame Mina by this kindly, strong-faced old man. I smiled and said, "I was ill. I have had a shock, but you have cured me already." "And how?" "By your letter to Mina last night." I was in doubt, but then everything took a hue of unreality, and I did not know what to trust, even the evidence of my own senses. Not knowing what to trust, I did not know what to do, and so had only to keep on working in what had hitherto been the groove of my life. The groove ceased to avail me, and I mistrusted myself. Doctor, you don't know what it is to doubt everything, even yourself. No, you don't. You couldn't with eyebrows like yours. He seemed pleased and laughed as he said, "So, you are a physiologist. I learn more here with each hour. I am with so much pleasure coming to you to breakfast. Oh, and sir, you will pardon praise from an old man, but you are blessed in your wife." I would listen to him go on praising Mina for a day, so I simply nodded and stood silent. "She is one of God's women, fashioned by his own hand, to show us men and other women that there is heaven where we can enter, and that its light can be here on earth. So true, so sweet, so noble, so little an egoist, and that, let me tell you, is much in this age, so skeptical and selfish. And you, sir, I have read all the letters to poor Miss Lucy, and some of them speak of you. So I know you since some days from the knowing of others, but I have seen your true self since last night. And you will give me your hand, will you not? And let us be friends for all our lives." We shook hands, and he was so earnest and so kind that it made me quite choky. "And now," he said, "may I ask you for some more help? I have a great task to do, and at the beginning it is to know you can help me here. Can you tell me what went before your going to Transylvania? Later on I may ask more help and of a different kind, but at first this will do." "Look here, sir," I said. "Does what you have to do concern the Count?" "It does," he said solemnly. "Then I am with you, heart and soul. As you go by the 10:30 train, you will not have time to read them, but I shall get the bundle of papers. You can take them with you and read them in the train." After breakfast, I saw him to the station. When we were parting, he said, "Perhaps you will come to town if I send to you, and take Madam Mina too." "We shall both come when you will," I said. I had got him the morning papers and the London papers of the previous night, and while we were talking at the carriage window, waiting for the train to start, he was turning them over. His eyes suddenly seemed to catch something in one of them. The Westminster Gazette. I knew it by the color, and he grew. The Westminster Gazette. I knew it by the color, and he grew quite white. He read something intently, groaning to himself. Mein God, so soon, so soon. I do not think he remembered me at the moment. Just then the whistle blew, and the train moved off. This recalled him to himself, and he leaned out of the window and waved his hand, calling out, "Love to Madamina. I shall write so soon as ever I can." We'll do a commercial break. I'll be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back. Dr. Seward's Diary, 26th of the September. Truly, there is no such thing as finality. Not a week since I said Finny, and yet here I am, starting fresh again, or rather going on with the same record until this afternoon. I had no cause to think of what it's done. Renfield had become, to all intents, as sane as he ever was. He was already well ahead with his fly business, and he had just started in the spider line. So, he had not been of any trouble to me. I had a letter from Arthur written on Sunday, and from it I gather that he is bearing up wonderfully well. Quincy Morris is with him, and that is much of a help, for he himself is a bubbling well of good spirits. Quincy wrote me a line too, and from him I hear that Arthur is beginning to recover something of his old buoyancy. So as to them all my mind is at rest. As for myself, I was settling down to my work with the enthusiasm which I used to have for it. So that I might fairly have said that the wound which poor Lucy left on me was becoming cicatrized. Everything is, however, now reopened, and what is to be the end, God only knows. I have an idea that Van Helsing thinks he knows too, but he will only let out enough at a time to whet curiosity. He went to Exeter yesterday and stayed there all night. Today he came back and almost bounded into the room at about 5:30, and thrust last night's Westminster Gazette into my hand. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? He asked, as he stood back and folded his arms. I looked over the paper, for I really did not know what he meant, but he took it from me and pointed out a paragraph about children being decoyed away at Hampstead. Did not convey much to me until I reached a passage where it described small punctured wounds on their throats. An idea struck me and I looked up. Well, he said, it is like poor Lucy's. And what do you make of it? Simply that there is some cause in common. Whatever it was that injured her and has injured them. I did not quite understand his answer. That is true. Indirectly, but not directly. How do you mean, Professor? I asked. I was a little inclined to take his seriousness lightly, for, after all, 4 days of rest and freedom from burning, harrowing anxiety does help to restore one's spirits. But when I saw his face, it sobered me. Never, even in the midst of our despair about poor Lucy, had he looked more stern. Tell me, I said. I can hazard no opinion. I do not know what to think, and I have no data on which to found a conjecture. Do you mean to tell me, friend John, that you have no suspicion as to what poor Lucy died of? Not after all the hints given, not only by events, but by me? Of nervous prostration following on great loss of waste of blood? And how the blood lost or waste? I shook my head. He stepped over and sat down beside me, and went on. You are clever man, friend John. You reason well, and your wit is bold, but you are too prejudiced. You do not let your eyes see, nor your ears hear, and that which is outside your daily life is not of account to you. Do you not think that there are things which you cannot understand, and yet which are, that some people see things that others cannot? But there are things old and new which must not be contemplated by men's eyes, because they know or think they know some things which other men have told them. Ah, it is the fault of our science that it wants to explain all, and if it explain not, then it says there is nothing to explain. But yet we see around us every day the growth of new beliefs, which think themselves new, and which are yet but the old, which pretend to be young like the fine ladies at the opera. I suppose now you do not believe in corporeal transference, no? Nor in materialization, no? Nor in astral bodies, no? Nor in the reading of thought, no? Nor in hypnotism? Yes, I said. Charcot has proved that pretty well. He smiled as he went on. Then you are satisfied as to it, yes? And of course then you understand how it act and can follow the mind of the great Charcot. Alas, there he is no more. Into the soul of the very patient that he influenced. No. Then friend John. Am I to take it that you simply accept fact and are satisfied to let from premise to conclusion be a blank? No. Then tell me, for I am student of the brain, how you accept the hypnotism and reject the thought reading. Let me tell you, my friend, that there are things done today in electrical science which would have been deemed unholy by the very men who discovered electricity, who would themselves not so long before have been burned as wizards. There are always mysteries in life. Why was it that Methuselah lived 900 years, and old Parr 169? And yet that poor Lucy with 4 men's blood in her poor veins could not live even one day. For had she lived one more day, we could have saved her. Do you know all the mysteries of life and death? Do you know altogether of comparative anatomy? And can say wherefore the qualities of brutes are in some men, and not in others? Can you tell me why, when other spiders die small and soon, that one great spider lived for centuries in the tower of the old Spanish church, and grew till, on descending, he could drunk the oil of all the church lamps? Can you tell me why in the Pambus A and elsewhere there are bats that come at night and open the veins of cattle and horses and suck dry their veins? How in some islands in the western seas there are bats which hang on the trees all day, that those who have seen describe as like giant nuts or pods, and that when the sailors sleep on the deck, because it is hot, flit down on them, and then in the morning are found dead men, white as even Miss Lucy was? Good God, Professor, I said, starting up. Do you mean to tell me that Lucy was bitten by such a bat, and that such a dung is here in London in the 19th century? He waved his hand for silence and went on. Can you tell me why the tortoise lives more long than generations of men? Why the elephant goes on till he have seen dynasties? And why the parrot never die, only a bite of cat or dog or other complaint? Can you tell me why men believe in all ages and places that there are some few who live on always, if they be permit, that there are men and women who cannot die? We all know, because science has vouched for the fact, that there have been toads shut up in rocks for thousands of years, shut in one so small hole that only holds him since the youth of the world. Can you tell me how the Indian faker can make himself to die and have been buried and have and his grave sealed and corn sowed on it, and the corn reaped and he and be cut and sown and reaped and cut again, and then men come and take away the unbroken seal, and that there lie the Indian faker not dead, but that rise up and walk amongst them as before. Here I interrupted him. I was getting bewildered. He so crowded on my mind his list of nature's eccentricities and possible impossibilities that my imagination was getting fired. I had a dim idea that he was teaching me some lesson, as long ago he used to do in his study at Amsterdam. But he used then to tell me the thing, so that I could have the object of thought in mind all the time, but now I was without this help. Yet I wanted to follow him, so I said, Professor, let me be your pet student again. Tell me the thesis so that I may apply your knowledge as you go on. At present I am going in my mind from point to point as a madman, and not a sane one. Follows an idea, I feel like a novice blistering through a bog in a mist, jumping from one tussock to another, in the mere blind effort to move on without knowing where I am going. That is a good image, he said. Well, I shall tell you, my thesis is this. I want you to believe. To believe what? To believe in things that you cannot. Let me illustrate. I have once an American who so defined faith, that faculty which enables us to believe things which we know to be untrue. For one, I follow that man who meant that we shall have an open mind, and not let a little bit of truth check the rush of a big truth, like a small rock does a railway truck. We get the small truth first. Good. We keep him and we value him. But all the same, we must not let him think himself. All the truth in the universe. All the truth in the universe. And you want me not to let some previous conviction endure the receptionary of my mind with regard to some strange matter. Do I read your lesson aright? Ah, you are my favorite people, still. It is worth to teach you now that you are willing to understand. You have taken the first step to understand. You think that then that those so small holes in the children's throat were made by the same that made the hole in Miss Lucy? I suppose so. He stood up and said solemnly, Then you are wrong. Oh, would it were so. But alas, no. It is worse, far worse, and far, far worse. In God's name, Professor Van Helsing, what do you mean? I cried. He threw himself with a despairing gesture into a chair, and placed his elbows on the table, covering his face with his hands as he spoke. They were made by Miss Lucy. Chapter 15. Dr. Seward's Diary. Continued. For a while sheer anger mastered me. It was as if he had during his life struck Lucy on the face. I smote the table hard and rose up, as I said to him, Dr. Van Helsing, are you mad? He raised his head and looked at me, and somehow the tenderness of his face calmed me at once. Would I were, he said. Madness were easy to bear compared with truth like this. Oh, my friend, why? Think you, did I go so far round? Why take so long to tell you so simple a thing? Was it because I hate you and have hated you all my life? Was it because I wished to give you pain? Was it that I wanted now so late revenge for that time when you saved my life and fought from a fearful death? Ah, no. Forgive me, said I. He went on. My friend, it was because I wished to be gentle in the breaking to you. For I know you have loved that so sweet lady. But even yet, I do not expect you to believe. It is so hard to accept at once any abstract truth that we may doubt such to be possible, when we have always believed the no of it. It is more hard still to accept so sad a concrete truth, and of such a one as Miss Lucy. Tonight I go to prove it. Dare you come with me? This staggered me. A man does not like to prove such a truth. Byron accepted from the category jealousy, and proved the very truth he most abhorred. He saw my hesitation and spoke. The logic is simple, no madman's logic this time. Jumping from tussock to tussock in a misty bog. If it be not true, then proof will be a relief. At worst, it will not harm, if it be true. Ah. There is the dread, yet very dread should help my cause, for in it is some need of belief. Come, I tell you, what I propose first, that we go off now and see that child in the hospital. Dr. Vincent of the North Hospital, where the papers say the child is. Friend of mine, and I think of yours since you were in class at Amsterdam. He will let two scientists see his case. If he will not let two friends see two friends, we shall tell him nothing, but only that we wish to learn. And then he took a key from his pocket and held it up. And then we spend the night, you and I, in the churchyard where Lucy lies. This is the key that locks the tomb. I had it from the coffin man to give to Arthur. My heart sank within me, for I felt that there was some fearful ordeal before us. I could do nothing, however, so I plucked up what heart I could, and said that we had better hasten, as the afternoon was passing. We found the child awake. It had had a sleep, and taken some food, and although it was going on well, Dr. Vincent took the bandage from its throat, and showed us the punctures. There was no mistaking the similarity to those which had been on Lucy's throat. They were smaller, and the edges looked fresher. That was all. We asked Vincent to what he attributed them, and he replied that it must have been a bite of some animal, perhaps a rat. But for his own part we had inclined to think that it was one of the bats which are so numerous on the northern heights of London. Out of so many harmless ones, he said, there may be some wild spaceman from the south of a more malignant species. Some sailor must have brought one home, and it managed to escape, or even from the zoological gardens a young one may have got loose, or one be bred from a vampire. There things do occur, you know. Only 10 days ago a wolf got out, and was, I believe, traced up in this direction. For a week after, the children were playing nothing but Red Riding Hood on the heath, and in every alley in the place until this Bloofer lady scare came along. Since then, since when it has been quite a gala time with them. Even this poor little mite. When he woke up today, asked the nurse if he might go away. When she asked him why he wanted to go, he said he wanted to play with the bloofer lady. I hope, said Van Helsing, that when you are sending the child home, you will caution its parents to keep strict watch over it. Those fancies to stray are most dangerous, and if the child were to remain out another night, it would probably be fatal. But in any case, I suppose you will not let it away for some days. Certainly not. Not for a week at least. Longer if the wound is not healed. Our visit to the hospital took more time than we had reckoned on, and the sun had clipped before we came out. When Van Helsing saw how dark it was, he said, "There is no hurry. It is more late than I thought. Come, let us seek somewhere that we may eat, and when we shall go on our way." We dined at Jack Straub's castle, along with a little crowd of bicyclists, and others who were genially noisy. About 10 o'clock we started from the inn. It was then very dark, and the scattered lamps made the darkness greater. When we were once outside their individual radius, the professor had evidently noted the road we were to go, for he went on unhesitatingly. But as for me, I was in quite a mix-up as to locality. As we went further, we met fewer and fewer people, till at last we were somewhat surprised when we met even the patrol of horse police, going their usual suburban route. At last we reached the wall of the churchyard, which we climbed over with some little difficulty, for it was very dark, and the whole place seemed so strange to us. We found the Westerner tomb. The professor took the key, opened the creaky door, and standing back politely, but quite unconsciously, motioned me to precede him. There was a delicious irony in the offer, and the courtliness of giving preference on such a ghastly occasion. My companion followed me quickly and cautiously, drew the door to after carefully ascertaining that the lock was a falling, and not a spring one. In the latter case, we should have been in a bad plight. Then we fumbled in his bag, and taking out a matchbox and a piece of candle, proceeded to make a light. The tomb in the daytime, and when wreathed with fresh flowers, had looked grim and gruesome enough. But now, some days afterwards, when the flowers hung limp and dead, their whites turning to rust and their greens to browns, when the spider and the beetle had resumed their accustomed dominance, when time discolored stone and dust-encrusted mortar, and rusty dank iron, and tarnished brass, and clouded silver plating gave back the feeble glimmer of a candle. The effect was more miserable and sordid than could have been imagined. It conveyed irresistibly the idea that animal life, was not the only thing which could pass away. Van Helsing went about his work systematically, holding his candle so that he could read the coffin plates, and so holding it that the sperm dropped in white patches, which congealed as they touched the metal. He made assurance of Lucy's coffin, another search in his bag, and he took out a turn screw. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "To open the coffin. You shall yet be convinced." Straight away he began taking out the screws and finally lifted off the lid, showing the casing of lead beneath. The sight was almost too much for me. It seemed to be as much an affront to the dead as it would have been to have stripped off her clothing in her sleep whilst living. I actually took hold of his hand to stop him. He only said, "You shall see," and again fumbling in his bag, took out a tiny fret saw, striking the turn screw through the lead with a swift downward stab, which made me wince. He made a small hole which was, however, big enough to admit the point of the saw. I had expected a rush of gas from the weak old corpse. We doctors who have had to study odd dangers have to become accustomed to such things, and I drew back towards the door, but the professor never stopped for a moment. He sawed down a couple of feet along one side of the lead coffin, and then across and down the other side, taking the edge of the loose flange. He bent it back towards the foot of the coffin, and holding up the candle into the aperture, motioned to me to look. I drew near and looked. The coffin was empty. It was certainly a surprise to me, and gave me a considerable shock. But Van Helsing was unmoved. He was now more sure than ever to his ground, and so emboldened to proceed in his task. "Are you satisfied now, friend John?" he asked. I felt all the dogged argumentiveness of my nature awake within me, as I answered him, "I am satisfied that Lucy's body is not in that coffin, but that only proves one thing." "And what is that, friend John?" "That it is not there." "That is good logic," he said, "so far as it goes, but how can you account for it not being there?" "Perhaps a body snatcher," I suggested. "Some of the Undertaker's people may have stolen it." I felt that I was speaking folly, and yet it was the only real cause which I could suggest. The professor sighed. "Ah, well," he said, "you must have more proof. Come with me." He put on the coffin lid again, gathered up all his things and placed them in the bag, blew out the light and placed the candle also in the bag. We opened the door and went out. Behind us he closed the door and locked it. He handed me the key, saying, "Will you keep it? You had better be assured." I laughed. It was not a very cheerful laugh, I am bound to say, as I motioned him to keep it. "A key is nothing," I said. "There may be duplicates. And anyhow, it is not difficult to pick a lock of that kind." He said nothing, but put the key in his pocket. Then he told me to watch at one side of the churchyard, whilst he would watch at the other. I took up my place behind a yew tree, and I saw his dark figure move until the intervening headstones and trees hid it from my sight. It was a lonely vigil just after I had taken my place. I heard a distant clock strike 12, and in time came 1 and 2. I was chilled and unnerved, and angry with the professor for taking me on such an errand, and with myself for coming. I was too cold and too sleepy to be keenly observant, and not sleepy enough to betray my trust, So although I had a dreary, miserable time, suddenly as I turned round, I thought I saw something like a white streak moving between two dark yew trees at the side of the churchyard, farthest from the tomb. At the same time, a dark mass moved from the professor's side of the ground, and hurriedly went towards it. Then I too moved, but I had to go round headstones and rail off tombs, and I stumbled over graves. The sky was overcast, and somewhere far off an early cock crew. A little way off, beyond a line of scattered juniper trees, which marked the pathway to the church, a white, dim figure flitted in the direction of the tomb. The tomb itself was hidden by trees, and I could not see where the figure disappeared. I heard the rustle of actual movement where I had first seen the white figure, and coming over found the professor holding in his arms a tiny child. When he saw me, he held it out to me, and said, "Are you satisfied now?" "No," I said, in a way that I felt was aggressive. "Do you not see the child?" "Yes, it is a child. But who brought it here? And is it wounded?" I asked. "We shall see," said the professor, and with one impulse we took our way out of the churchyard, he carrying this weeping child. When we had got some little distance away, we went into a clump of trees and struck a match, and looked at the child's throat. It was without a scratch or scar of any kind. "Was I right?" I asked triumphantly. "We were just in time," said the professor thankfully. We had now to decide what we were to do with the child, and so consulted about it. If we were to take it to a police station, we should have to give some account of our movements during the night. At least we should have had to make some statement as to how he had come to find the child. So finally we decided that we would take it to the heath, and when we heard a policeman coming, would leave it where he could not fail to find it. We would then seek our way home as quickly as we could. All fell out well. At the edge of Hampstead Heath, we heard a policeman's heavy tramp, and laying the child on the pathway, we waited and watched until we saw it as he flashed his lantern to and fro. We heard his exclamation of astonishment, and then we went away silently. By good chance we got a cab near the Spaniards, and drove to town. I cannot sleep, so I make this entry, but I must try to get a few hours' sleep, as Van Helsing is to call for me at noon. He insists that I shall go with him on another expedition. 27th of September. It was 2 o'clock before we found a suitable opportunity for our attempt. The funeral, held at noon, was all completed, and the last stragglers of the mourners had taken themselves lazily away. When looking carefully from behind a clump of alder trees, we saw the sexton lock the gate after him. We knew that we were safe till morning. Did we desire it? But the professor told me that we should not want more than an hour at most. Again I felt that horrid sense of the reality of things, in which any effort of imagination seemed out of place, and I realized distinctly the perils of the law which we were incurring in our unhallowed work. Besides, I felt it was all so useless, outrageous as it was to open a leaden coffin to see if a woman dead nearly a week were really dead. It now seemed the height of folly to open the tomb again, when we knew from the evidence of our own eyesight that the coffin was empty. I shrugged my shoulders, however, and rested silent, for Van Helsing had a way of going on his own road, no matter who remonstrated. He took the key, opened the vault, and again courteously motioned me to proceed. The place was not so gruesome as last night, but oh, how unutterably mean-looking when the sunshine streamed in. Van Helsing walked over to Lucy's coffin, and I followed. He bent over and again forcibly forced back the leaden flange, and then a shock of surprise and dismay shot through me. There lay Lucy, seemingly just as we had seen her the night before her funeral. She was, if possible, more radiantly beautiful than ever, and I could not believe that she was dead. The lips were red, nay, redder than before, and on the cheeks was a delicate bloom. "Is this a juggle?" I said to him. "Are you convinced now?" said the professor in response, and as he spoke he put over his hand, and in a way that made me shudder, pulled back the dead lips and showed the white teeth. "See?" he went on. "See? They are even sharper than before, with this and this." And he touched one of the canine teeth, and that below it, the little children can be bitten. Are you of belief now, friend John? Once more, argumentatively, hostility woke within me. I could not accept such an overwhelming idea, as he suggested. So, with an attempt to argue, of which I was even at the moment ashamed, I said, "She may have been placed here since last night." "Indeed, that is so. And by whom?" "I do not know. Someone has done it." "And yet she has been dead 1 week. Most peoples in that time would not look so." I had no answer for this, so was silent. Van Helsing did not seem to notice my silence. At any rate, he showed neither chagrin nor triumph. He was looking intently at the face of the dead woman, raising the eyelids and looking at the eyes, and once more opening the lips and examining the teeth. Then he turned to me and said, "Here, there is one thing which is different from all recorded. Here is some dual life that is not as the common. She was bitten by the vampire when she was in a trance, sleepwalking. Oh, you start. You do not know that, friend John, but you shall know it all later. In trance, could he best come to take more blood? In trance she died, and in trance she is, undead too. So it is that she differ from all other, usually when the undead sleep at home." As he spoke, he made a comprehensive sweep of his arm to designate what to a vampire was home. "Their face show what they are, but this is so sweet that was when she not undead. She go back to the nothings of the common dead. There is no malign there. See, and it make hard that I must kill her in her sleep." This turned my blood cold. It began to dawn upon me that I was accepting Van Helsing's theories. But if she were really dead, what was there of terror in the idea of killing her? He looked up at me and evidently saw the change in my face, for he said almost joyously, "Ah, you believe now." And we'll stop there. And taking into account that I was originally going to read till page 1582 and instead read to 1600. All right. So let's go ahead and do the outro. Let me make sure to bookmark the page first. All right, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow with... Well, actually, you know what? Let me go ahead and do it my usual. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Have a great night. Stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you all on tomorrow for some Batman... Nope. I don't know. I was thinking bats. Bats on the brain. Tuesday is Haunted Mansion. Thursday is Batman. So I'll see you all tomorrow with more of the Haunted Mansion. In the meantime, let's go ahead and find someone to raid off to. Just choosing someone to raid off to. All right, we're going to go ahead and raid off to Waffles. Please give Waffles some love and support. And I'll see you all tomorrow with some more The Haunted Mansion. Later.